Chapter 309. Bang! There was another gunshot. It was Colonel Hanks who fired. He shot Liang Xiao's lower abdomen. Liang Xiao's lower abdomen also began to bleed. Her legs went soft and she fell to the ground. This time, Hanks couldn't keep up with Liang Xiao's body. His left shoulder was exposed. Bang! Charlotte pulled the trigger. A bullet traveled a few hundred meters and instantly penetrated Hanks's left shoulder. At that moment, blood spurted out from his left shoulder and dyed Liang Xiao's shoulder and cheek red. His body was also lifted up by the huge impact and fell back. This was a real shot. Liang Xiao also lay on the ground and didn't dare to show her head. Her face was pale. At this time, she wasn't sure if Charlotte would shoot her. However, compared to Charlotte's terrifying marksmanship, what made her feel worse was Charlotte's attitude towards her. He didn't seem to care about her anymore. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fired in this situation. Because even if there was a deviation of 1 centimeter, she would be the one hit, not Hanks. Kill him. Kill him for me. Hanks didn't die, but Charlotte's shot shattered his courage. After he gave the order, he passed out. Gunshots rang out on the hillside. Bullets rained down on the right side of Charlotte. When Charlotte fired, his position was exposed. These people weren't ordinary soldiers. They were all veterans, especially the CIB agents, who were the elites of the elite. Liang Xiao pulled out the pistol on her waist and roared, "Stop shooting! Stop shooting! If anyone kills him, I'll be the first to kill him." There was a brief pause in the gunshots. Charlotte crawled away, but as soon as he moved, a bullet flew from above and hit the edge of the rock he was hiding on. The sniper had already locked onto him. Moreover, the sniper was wearing night vision equipment that could track him through the heat emitted by his body in the night environment. In front of the thermal imaging night vision equipment, even if they hid behind a rock, they would not be able to hide. Charlotte stuck close to the ground and observed the sniper through the edge of the rock with his left eye. The sniper was using a thermal imaging night vision device to observe Luke's direction and was still talking. Charlotte's left eye locked onto his lips and deciphered the language. A second later, Charlotte rolled down the hill. As soon as he left the rock, a grenade exploded on it. Just now, the sniper was relaying his coordinates to a CIB agent. Fortunately, he had deciphered the sniper's language. Otherwise, if he had been a second late, even if he had not been killed by the grenade, he would have been severely injured. Rumble! The CIB agent operating the grenade launcher fired a second grenade. It exploded a few meters in front of Charlotte. Rock fragments, dirt, and sand flew in all directions from the center of the explosion. Although Charlotte's movement speed was extremely fast, he was still injured by a lot of the rock fragment. The dirt and sand that were lifted up by the explosion also made his face dirty and messy. After all, the people who came to capture him were carefully selected elites, not rookies. Bang! In the midst of fleeing, Charlotte suddenly stopped and turned around to fire. The CIB agent operating the grenade launcher was just about to pull the trigger when a bullet pierced his neck. A quarter of his neck was instantly cut off. His body fell backward, but his fingers still carried out the command of his brain before he died and pulled the trigger. The grenade launcher vibrated, and a grenade shot straight into the sky. Fu*K. The sniper not far from him could no longer remain calm as he got up and ran. Bang! Charlotte's sniper rifle vibrated, and a bullet instantly traversed a few hundred meters and accurately pierced the back of the sniper's head. Rumble! The grenade fell and exploded on the hillside. Although no one was killed in the explosion, the camp on the hillside fell into chaos. Taking advantage of the chaos, Charlotte quickly rushed down the hillside. Although the enemy still had a dozen people left, they lost the best sniper and the CIB agent who fired the grenade. Coupled with the unconscious commander, they didn't pose much of a threat to Charlotte. If they caught up, Charlotte had absolute confidence that he could kill them all. As for Liang Xiao, The scene of her being held hostage by the commander kept flashing in Charlotte's mind. The commander fired 2 shots at Liang Xiao. Although they were both empty bullets, her body showed signs of being shot twice, and each time it was more intense than the last. Charlotte sighed in his heart. "Are you helping me? You deliberately crouched down to give me a chance to kill the commander of the Special Forces? Why are you doing this? We're done. You'll get yourself into trouble if you do this." The chaos on the hillside was over. The night shrouded the hillside, the cold wind blew, and the air was filled with the smell of blood and smoke. Liang Xiao picked up the thermal imaging night vision device left by the sniper, but she could no longer see Charlotte. Her lips curled into a smile as she muttered to herself, "Take care." At the hillside, Charlotte effortlessly found the hiding place of Big Moon Tia and Sairami. Big Moon Tia and Sairami didn't notice him at all. When they heard the noise, they aimed their AK-47s in his direction. Charlotte lowered his voice. "It's me. Xia." Sairami was very excited. "You're not dead. Did you kill all those Americans?" Charlotte said, "No, there's still a dozen of them. Let's go, take another route. We have to be quick, they'll most likely call for reinforcements. Once we get entangled with them, we'll be in danger. I know of a path. Follow me." Tia of the Great Moon Empire mounted her horse. Sairami also swiftly mounted the horse, and then extended her hand to Charlotte. "Come up." Charlotte's warhorse had already been blown to death, so he had to share a horse with Sairami. He grabbed Sairami's hand and climbed up the horse's back, squeezing himself into the saddle. The 2 of them were in the same saddle, and the degree of closeness could be described as integration. "Go!" Sairami shouted softly, and her legs clamped the horse's abdomen. The white horse under her took a step forward and chased after Big Moon Tia. The horse's hooves ran on the rugged mountain road, jolting up and down. The man and woman on the horse's back were also shaking up and down, and it was inevitable that their bodies would come into contact with each other. This kind of contact was very sensitive. Charlotte's front was tightly pressed against her back. That plump, that softness, rubbing back and forth, that feeling was like an electric shock, making him nervous. However, another face appeared in his mind, Liang Xiao's face. Sporadic gunshots came from behind, but they were just blind shots without a target. Someone seemed to want to use the gunshots to lure Charlotte to return fire, so as to determine his position again. But this was obviously futile. The 3 people and 2 horses had long since left their range of control. The white horse ran wildly. Sairami turned around and asked, "Xia, is that woman your woman?" Hearing Sairami's voice, Charlotte retracted his gaze from behind. He casually said, "What woman? Don't lie to me, I saw it all, the woman who was held hostage by the officer." Sairami asked, "Is she your woman?" Charlotte frowned slightly. He didn't want to talk about Liang Xiao with anyone. That was an indelible scar in his heart. But Sairami was a woman who would break the casserole to get to the bottom of it. If he didn't tell her something, she wouldn't give up. After a moment of silence, he said, "Well, she used to be." "Used to be?" Sairami giggled. "That officer actually used your former woman to threaten you, is he crazy?" Charlotte knew that the commander's brain was absolutely not crazy. The commander used Liang Xiao to threaten him. Perhaps there was another purpose, that is, to test the position of Liang Xiao in his mind. This kind of test may be related to Liang Xiao's position in the CIB, and will also affect the CIB's action plan against him. However, these were things that couldn't be discussed with Sairami. "Xia, between me and her, who is prettier?" Sairami's melon head seemed to be full of all kinds of strange questions. "Why are you asking me such a question? Now is the time to escape," Charlotte said with a wry smile. "The horse is running, not us. Our conversation doesn't affect the speed of the horse." Sairami continued to ask, "Between me and her, who is prettier? Tell me, I want to know the answer." "This." Charlotte hesitated. "You are younger than her." What kind of answer is that? Then let me ask you, between me and her, whose breasts are bigger? You. Charlotte's head was already dizzy. You are really an honest person. You men like women with big breasts. Are you like that too? Charlotte was speechless. Even if you don't say it, I know you like it. Do you still know how to guess my mind? Don't brag. Charlotte disdainfully said. You're hard. What? You're hard. It's so obvious. Do you think I can't feel it? This shows that you like women with big breasts like me. You are an honest man, even your body is so honest. Charlotte! Just a moment ago, it was the feeling of life and death in a hail of bullets, but in the blink of an eye, it was the feeling of serene. She had a cute baby face, and it seemed that even her head was baby-shaped. She was not mature at all. She could be said to be immature, but in that aspect, she was sexy and charming to the extreme. She did not lose to those mature women in their 20s, and even surpassed them. Her every movement was very seductive, and every word and smile carried the flavor of a fox spirit. Everywhere she went, she stirred up people's hearts. In short, she was like a happy fruit. The feeling of being with her was hard to describe in words. Just now, Charlotte still thought of Liang Xiao, but after Sirene's disturbance, Liang Xiao also disappeared. The only thing left in his mind was her perky buttocks and her big breasts. The white horse jolted, and the person on the horse's back trembled. Sirene's face became redder and redder. Charlotte also pursed his lips, as if he was enduring something. After a while, the big Moontia Su left the main road and went into a mountain stream that had no road. The mountain stream was shrouded in darkness, and the faint sound of water could be heard. Charlotte could roughly guess the big Moontia Su's new route. Chapter 3:10. The light of dawn dispelled the darkness, and the 3 men and 2 horses entered the woods next to the river to rest and eat. This river was the river that flowed out of the White Hun tribe. Sometimes it would become an underground river that drilled into the mountains, and sometimes it would come out of the ground and become a river that flowed out of the ground. Only Taya and Serene knew where it flowed, and could follow the flow of the river to cross this mountainous area. The 2 horses were tied to the trunk of a tree, and the 3 men ate on the grass. After running for a night, even a body made of iron could not support it, especially Charlotte, who had also experienced a life-and-death battle. His physical consumption was far greater than that of Taya and Serene, and he urgently needed to replenish his energy and rest. Charlotte's body was full of lacerations caused by rock fragments, and his cloth was also full of dark red bloodstains. His face was covered with dust and blood, and his hair was messy. He looked like a soldier who had just come down from the front line. He looked very miserable, but he had a kind of charm that was a mixture of wildness and courage. Taya and Serene were not much better. Their faces were also covered with dust, and their clothes were torn by branches, revealing large areas of their snow-white skin. They also had the charm of wildness and courage. If they and Charlotte were described as lions, then they were lionesses, and Charlotte was a male lion. Xia, have a piece of beef jerky. Serene handed a piece of beef jerky to Charlotte. Thank you. Charlotte took the beef jerky, tore off a piece, and chewed it. He was really hungry, and the dry beef jerky had become delicious. Here, drink some water. Serene unscrewed the kettle and fed Charlotte water. Charlotte felt a little embarrassed, but did not refuse Serene's scout. Not only did Serene feed him water, but she also reached out to wipe the water that spilled from the corner of his mouth. She squatted in front of him with her legs slightly open. Under her tattered short skirt, he could see her snow-white and plump thighs, as well as a patch of white scenery. That was her hand-sewn underwear, the kind that wasn't particular about the stitching. Some parts that people didn't dare to look at directly also entered his line of sight. It was extremely seductive. This made him feel that although he was drinking water, it had the effect of wine. You have a lot of wounds on your body, let me help you deal with them. After giving Charlotte some water, Cherami once again played the role of a battlefield doctor. Aha! Before Silami could enter the role of a battlefield medic, Tia couldn't bear it any longer and coughed. Silami, what are you doing? You are the most outstanding warrior in our tribe, not a nurse, and definitely not a lover who serves men. The words that Tia of the Great Moon Empire had yet to say were, "You've disgraced the tribe." Yeah? How did I serve you? Cherami frowned. Xia, you should be the one serving me. Massage my legs, they're so sore. Charlotte rolled his eyes at her, got up and walked towards a very tall and lush tree. Where are you going? Tia of the Great Moon Empire's tone softened. She thought that she had angered Charlotte. Charlotte said, "You guys sleep first, I'll keep watch. Then you guys come and take my place." The two White Hun women looked at each other, but no one said a word. Then, they saw Charlotte climb up the huge tree like a monkey, and with a few steps, he hid in the dense canopy. Is he a monkey? He's really strong. Those stinky men in our tribe are like goats in a sheepfold compared to him. Cherami's azure eyes were filled with excitement and worship. Not only did she admire the amazing jumping ability and agility that Charlotte had just displayed, but as a sharpshooter of the White Hun tribe, what she admired the most was Charlotte's godly marksmanship last night. Tia of the Great Moon Empire glared at Cherami. Have you fallen in love with him? Cherami's baby face instantly turned red. I haven't fallen in love with him. I'm just playing with him. You know, aren't all the women in our tribe like that? Men are like clothes. Tia of the Great Moon Empire sighed. He's definitely not a businessman. We all saw how strong he was last night with our own eyes. Out of the 3 armed helicopters on the other side, he took out one with a sniper rifle. The other 20 or so people were all elites with very advanced equipment, but they couldn't even break through his defensive line. Not only did he retreat unscathed, he even covered our safe retreat. Such a person, what's his status? Cherami shook her head. I don't know, but I know that he's our friend. Last night, he was willing to risk his life to protect us. We should trust him. Of course I trust him. Tia of the Great Moon said. Don't you understand why I'm saying all this? What I mean is, you have to control your feelings and don't get too involved. I'm not involved too much. Cherami thought for a moment. She stretched out her hands, the thumb and index finger of her left hand forming a circle, and then the index finger of her right hand poked through the circle, exposing a section of her finger. She then said in a deadpan manner, about this deep. My current relationship with him is also this deep. Tia of the Great Moon Empire rolled her eyes and lay down weakly. She was too lazy to talk to this clown. Cherami shrugged and also lay down on the grass to sleep. On the tree, Charlotte had just retracted his gaze from the opposite mountain peak. He had already observed the surrounding environment and did not find any traces of the U.S. military or CIB agent. This result made him feel a lot more relaxed. Charlotte sat on the branch, took off his backpack, and took out the Ming Dynasty compass. He held it in his hand and carefully examined it. This compass was indeed the one he had repaired back then. The parts that he had welded together were all there. However, the needle was no longer the original needle. The needle of the compass was pointing in the direction of the White Xiongnu tribe. Charlotte thought to himself, the experts dug up the needle in China, changed the needle, and then came to the White Xiongnu tribe. If I successfully steal the Sword of Attila and build a hydropower station for the White Xiongnu tribe, will I be able to dig up a new needle when exploring the tunnel? Or will there not be a needle, and the White Xiongnu tribe will be the end of this secret? Either of these two possibilities could happen, but the prerequisite was to give the Sword of Attila to the White Xiongnu tribe and build a hydropower station. Of these two conditions, the latter was not difficult. As long as there was money, it was actually very easy to build a small hydropower station. On the contrary, the Sword of Attila was a very difficult condition. The God Domain Group is in Korea, and On Jinjian is also an old statesman of Korea. He has a decisive influence in both the black and white worlds of Korea. If I want to get the sword of Attila, other than going to Korea to steal it, what other way is there for me to get the sword of Attila? If I want to steal it, how should I do it? Charlotte's mind was filled with these questions. A white shadow suddenly swept across the sky, interrupting Charlotte's train of thought. Looking into the distance, it was a predator drone. However, it did not hover in this area, but quickly flew past. The CIA will not give up on hunting me. They will send drones to search for my whereabouts. They will even use U.S. military satellite. It seems that I have to be more careful. Charlotte thought to himself. A wave of tiredness hit him, and he closed his eyes. With no enemies, he no longer needed to keep his eyes open and keep watch. This was also the benefit of having the eyes of penetration. If it was someone else in this situation, they would definitely not dare to relax. They were also too tired. Sairami and Taya quickly fell asleep, forgetting to take over Charlotte's post. Charlotte did not wake them up. He slept until the afternoon, and the sun on the eastern horizon quietly climbed to the middle of the sky. A ray of scorching sunlight shone through the gaps between the branches and leaves onto Charlotte's glasses, and he woke up. A series of rustling footsteps reached Charlotte's ears. Charlotte climbed up from the tree branch warily and looked towards the direction of the sound. The branches and trunks of the trees quickly disappeared in his left eye, and he quickly saw the source of the sound. It was Taya. She was walking to the side of the camp. She carried her AK-47 and looked around vigilantly. Did she discover the enemy? Charlotte suddenly became nervous. His left eye also quickly searched the area in front of Taya. However, other than trees and weeds, he saw nothing. At this time, Taya walked to a patch of grass, lifted her skirt, pulled down her handmade underwear, and then hurriedly squatted down. A small patch of grass had been watered, and it would probably grow more luxuriantly because of this. I'm going to faint. Charlotte smiled bitterly and looked away, but his mind could not erase the mysterious scenery that he had just glimpsed. Then, he suddenly remembered a piece of mahjong tile. Shalami also woke up. She slapped her forehead and then ran over to Charlotte. Charlotte slid down from the tree and said with a smile, I know you're here to exchange for me, but there's no need. I overslept too. You overslept too? Shalami suddenly laughed. Men are indeed unreliable. Charlotte, Taya also walked over. She did not know what had just happened, and her expression was still as calm and cold as ever. Don't let something like this happen again. It's very dangerous. Charlotte lightly said, It won't happen again. Let's go. I saw a drone earlier, so we have to be careful. If we're discovered, those people will quickly catch up to us. The great Moon Tia said, This path is only known to the people of our tribe. Don't worry, as long as we don't walk out of the forest, the U.S. drones won't be able to find us. After a pause, she continued, If we walk out of this mountainous area, we only need to pass through the territory of a tribe to enter the Wakan corridor. That's not the U.S.'s territory, so we'll be much safer. Charlotte said, Let's follow your plan. A few minutes later, Taya got on her warhorse and walked in the direction of the river. Charlotte and Shalamis but squeezed into the saddle again, to the extent that they were almost one. I know that tribe. Our chief has a good relationship with the chief of that tribe. As long as we walk through this path, we'll be safe when we reach there, Shalami said. That's great. Charlotte was secretly happy that he did not need to pay for the passage to the tribe. When we reach China, buy me clothes. Okay, I'll buy you clothes. I'll buy you 100 sets. Wear them until you puke. You're hard. Chapter 3:11. Although the U.S. military could bomb whoever they wanted in Afghanistan, and they were strong enough to do whatever they wanted, they did not have complete control over Afghanistan, especially in the areas controlled by the Santa Ida militant group and tribal forces. Therefore, in these areas, the CIB could only use drones and air search forces, and did not dare to set foot on the ground. Under the leadership of Big Moon Taya, it took the three a full week to walk out of the mountainous area, and then they entered the Wakhan corridor through the Pashtun tribes. During this time, the three only encountered controlled drones and U.S. military fighter jets whizzing past, and did not encounter any ground-armed forces. For the CIB, after the failure of the operation that night, they had actually lost the best opportunity to capture Charlotte. Charlotte escaped again, and there was also Big Moon Taya, who had a good relationship with the tribal forces. This was equivalent to a fish in the sea, and it was almost impossible to catch them again. However, the CIB was obviously unwilling to give up, and all kinds of controlled reconnaissance forces were frequently dispatched. Even if they failed, they would not give up. In any case, another week later, Charlotte passed through the Wakhan corridor and entered the border of China. "We're safe." After entering the border of China, Charlotte completely relaxed. He excitedly picked up a handful of soil under his feet and sprinkled it into the sky, then shouted, "We're home!" What made him excited was not that he had returned to his own country, but that he had finally gotten rid of the CIB's pursuit. This trip to Afghanistan had experienced a lot of danger, but he had also gained a lot. Not only did he know the secrets, but the greater gain was that he had completely matured in several battles, and had become a person who could truly take charge. Is this China? It's so desolate. Instead, Shalami had a disappointed look on her face. In the past 2 weeks, she had been thinking about going to China to buy clothes, but in her line of sight, there was only a desolate scene. Not to mention gorgeous clothes, she couldn't even buy the handmade underwear that she was wearing. Charlotte said with a smile, "This is the border. When you reach the cities of China, you will be surprised by the development of China over the years. When the country was strong, the people would also feel proud." "Xia, you said we're safe, right?" Big Moon Taya looked into the distance with a telescope. In that direction, a cloud of dust was rising along with the wind, moving towards them at a very fast speed. It was not a sandstorm but a convoy. Charlotte saw it at a glance. He even saw the military license plates on the vehicles and the soldiers sitting in them. The Wakhan corridor is located in a very sensitive area, and the pressure of counterterrorism has always been high. It was not surprising that China's border guards appeared so quickly, because this place had always been under the surveillance of the military. Before Charlotte could speak, Shirami had already removed the AK-47 from her shoulder. Looking at her appearance, it seemed like she was ready to take cover and shoot. Charlotte pressed down on her hand. "Don't do anything stupid. Leave it to me." Shilami subconsciously glanced at Tisha, but without waiting for her instructions, she handed the AK-47 in her hand to Charlotte. Charlotte then extended his hand to Big Moon Taya. "Give me your gun too." Big Moon Taya hesitated for a moment, but finally removed the AK-47 from her shoulder and handed it to Charlotte. But then she said fiercely, "Remember, your people are still in our hands. If Shilami and I are arrested, your people will die in our tribe." This was a threat. Charlotte smiled indifferently. "We've been through so many things together. Don't you believe me? Don't worry. I'm here. No one will hurt you." Shilami waved her fist and hit Charlotte's shoulder. She giggled. "I believe you." Her punch was very heavy, and it felt a little heartless. Charlotte could not help but frown slightly. But in the face of Shilami, he could not be angry. For the past half a month, he and Shilami had been riding on the same horse every day. That saddle had inevitably been squeezed and rubbed against each other. Although they did not rub against each other, their feelings for each other had grown a lot. If it was not for the fact that they were in a hurry every day, coupled with the existence of Big Moon Taya, Charlotte would not even need to take the initiative. Shilami would have already eaten him up. For the past half a month, Charlotte felt that he was about to fall sick. The convoy soon arrived in front of the three people and surrounded them in a fan shape. An officer jumped down from the car, raised his gun, and took aim. He shouted, "You have entered China's territory. Put down your weapons and identify yourselves." Charlotte put the two AK-47s and his sniper rifle on the ground. He then raised his hands and said loudly, "Colonel, I want to talk to you." The other party had the rank of colonel on his shoulder. Charlotte's shout indicated that he wanted to talk to him. The leading colonel was stunned for a moment. In this case, Charlotte should have identified himself, but he did not do so. Instead, he asked to talk. "Who are you?" Charlotte said loudly, "I am from the National Security Agency. You must have sufficient authority to overstep my boundaries. I want to talk to you, please cooperate." What kind of tone was this? The colonel thought for a moment and finally nodded. "You come over. The two of them stay here and don't move." Charlotte walked over and went straight to the point. "I want to borrow your cell phone to make a phone call, and then someone will explain the situation to you. You'd better not lie to me, or I won't be polite to you." The colonel did not make things difficult for Charlotte. He handed his cell phone to Charlotte. Charlotte actually had a satellite phone with him, but he did not dare to turn it on for the past half a month, for fear of being located by the CIA. When he set foot on China's territory, he did turn it on once, but before he could dial a number, it ran out of power. Charlotte dialed Long Bing's number. There were very few people who knew Long Bing's phone number, so once someone called her, she would be able to guess who it was just by looking at the address of the number. But before she could speak, Charlotte said, "It's me. I'm back." Long Bing was silent for a moment before she said, "You've been arrested?" This insight made Charlotte sweat. He smiled bitterly. "How can you say that? I'm also on a mission, and I don't know anyone. I have an officer with me. You can call him and explain the situation." "What about Tang Yuyan?" Long Bing asked. "She's still in Afghanistan. The situation is a bit complicated." "I'll tell you later," Charlotte said. "Well, give the phone to the officer. I'll explain the situation to him." It was Long Bing's voice. Charlotte handed the phone to the colonel. "Colonel, someone wants to talk to you." The colonel's expression was very serious. He took the phone and carefully handed it over. "Hello, may I ask who you are?" Elder Taya and Sirami kept staring at Charlotte and the leading colonel. The two women looked very nervous. After all, there were dozens of heavily armed soldiers standing in front of them, and they were all highly trained in military affairs. Even now, those soldiers were still carrying out the colonel's orders and pointing their guns at them. Those black muzzles made them nervous. "Chief, what is Xia talking to the officer about?" Sirami finally couldn't hold it in and asked. Elder Taya said, "Xia is talking to someone on the phone, asking that person to explain the situation to the officer. Xia Duo is a member of the China government. He's probably a very high-level agent." "Chief, you can understand Chinese?" Sirami looked very surprised. Elder Taya rolled her eyes. The ancient Xiongnu language is actually very similar to Chinese and Tibetan. It's just that you don't want to learn it. However, I don't know much. Don't tell Xia. Isn't that lying to him? Elder Taya waved her hand and slapped the back of Sirami's head. Sirami glanced at Elder Taya with dissatisfaction, but kept her mouth shut. At this time, the colonel had already ended his call with Long Bing. His attitude had also changed greatly. When he faced Charlotte again, there was a smile on his face. "I have a general idea of the situation. I'm just waiting for the official written documents to arrive. Now, I'll have to trouble you to follow us back to the camp. Once the documents are faxed, I'll immediately send you to the airport." "All right, thank you in advance." Charlotte was also very polite. Elder Taya and Sirami were also arranged to board a military vehicle and sat together with Charlotte. However, the guns of the three were temporarily confiscated and not returned to them. The three were taken to a military base of the Border Defense Forces. By the time the convoy arrived, the documents had already been faxed. Therefore, Charlotte and the other two were transferred to the nearest airport without even getting off the vehicle. The issue of the plane tickets had already been settled. Charlotte and the other two were directly sent to the airport. All they needed to do was to board the plane. Mr. Xia, we have already entrusted the airline company to specially deal with your guns. After you get off the plane, someone will send it to you. However, the guns of your two friends cannot be returned. Please forgive us, the colonel said as he sent Charlotte to the plane. Charlotte smiled and said, No problem. They don't need guns here. That's all. Thank you. You're welcome. The colonel waved his hand and gave a military salute. Charlotte was stunned for a moment. He also gave a military salute. However, his actions were obviously not as standard as the other parties. This was also the first time he received a military salute from a soldier. It made him feel that he was also a soldier. He was full of responsibility and honor. This feeling was really strange. The three of them were arranged to sit in the first-class cabin. When the three of them entered the cabin, they immediately attracted a strange gaze. Some were surprised, some were contemptuous, and some were confused. This was not strange at all. The clothes on the three of them were still the same clothes they had worn when they walked out of the White Hun tribe. They were tattered and had a lot of blood stains. Charlotte was still okay. Elder Taya and Sirami looked like savages from a primitive tribe. Moreover, they were savages who were extremely sexy. What are you looking at? Have you never seen a woman before? Be careful or I'll dig out your eyes, Sirami said fiercely. However, she was speaking Pashto. Apart from Charlotte and Elder Taya, no one else could understand her. A young man in a suit and leather shoes laughed sarcastically. What kind of bird language are you speaking? You're from a primitive tribe, right? You're actually learning to sit in the first-class cabin. Go take a bath before you take the plane. But remember, you should go to the economy cabin. That's more suitable for you. What did that guy say? Sirami did not understand. Elder Taya frowned, her face cold. If he had said something like that to her in Afghanistan, she would not have hesitated to kill that arrogant young man. However, she did not tell Sirami what the young man had said. She did not want Charlotte to know that she knew some Chinese. More importantly, she did not want to cause trouble in China. Charlotte walked over. Without saying a word, he waved his hand and chopped the young man's carotid artery. The young man did not even have time to groan before he fainted. The air marshal witnessed the whole process, but he had already been informed, so he turned his head and pretended not to see it. Charlotte did not want to do this, but he did not want to miss any opportunity to build a good relationship with Elder Taya. Not for anything else, but for Tang Yuyan, peaceful, the few China experts, and the place that the compass pointed to. Sirami held Charlotte's arm and smiled sweetly. She moved closer to Charlotte's ear and said something. Charlotte's eyes uncontrollably moved to Sirami's short skirt. His face inexplicably turned red. Chapter 312. Capital, Tang Yuyan's house. Wow, what a soft bed! Inside the room, Sirami was rolling around on the soft mattress. Her voluptuous figure, tattered short skirt, and rolling spring scenery pounced on Charlotte, causing him to forget to blink his eyes. If Big Moon Tia was not by his side, Charlotte really did not know if he would not be able to restrain himself and pounce on her. Even if he could insist on being Liu Xiaohui, if Sirami took the initiative, the result would not be predictable. Charlotte said, "You guys rest here, we'll talk tomorrow." Big Moon Tia did not speak, but Sirami bounced up from the bed. "Xia, why don't you arrange a room for our chief? How can our chief sleep in the same room with me? This is not in line with her noble status." With that, she winked at Charlotte, as if hinting something to Charlotte. Charlotte smiled bitterly and shrugged, then glanced at Big Moon Tia. Big Moon Tia looked at Sirami. "I asked Xia to arrange it this way. Sirami, don't you want to sleep with me?" Silami was speechless. In fact, her winking at Charlotte earlier was a hint that she wanted to be with him. She thought that Charlotte had arranged for Big Moon Tia to sleep in her room because he was muddle-headed. She did not expect that it was Big Moon Tia who asked Charlotte to arrange it this way. In this way, her good deed was ruined. In fact, it was not only this time. In the half a month before they came, Big Moon Tia had always played the role of a spoiler, preventing Silami and Charlotte from reaching that step. Charlotte and Silami's entanglement was actually due to the matter of the compass. Now that Big Moon Tia was here to spoil things, it was actually easier for him. After Charlotte left, Silami said with dissatisfaction, "Chief, what do you mean? Didn't you give Xia to me back then? I want to sleep with him, why do you want to sleep with me?" The Great Moon Tia said with a serious expression, "You're still young. There are many things that you don't understand. I'm actually doing this to protect you, and also to protect our tribe." "Protect me and our tribe?" Shilami pouted. "Chief, isn't it just a matter of sleeping? Even if I sleep with Xia, I won't lose a piece of flesh, right? Our tribe won't lose a single sheep, right?" Tia suddenly slapped the back of Shirami's head. Shirami rubbed the back of his head and said gloomily, "Chieftain, I'm already stupid and you keep hitting my head. Do you want to make me even more stupid?" Tia glared at Shirami and then whispered in his ear, "You bastard. Even if I don't hit you, you won't become smarter. For the past few days I've thought about it very clearly. You can't be with him." "Why? Have you ever wondered why the U.S. military helicopters would appear in our tribe? Why are we being hunted? Xia was a special agent of the China government. The Americans wanted to capture him. If you're with him, you'll bring trouble to our tribe. We can't fight against the Americans at all. If we become enemies with them because of Xia, our tribe will perish. But why did we follow him to China? For the sake of the sword of Attila, the sacred relic of our ancestors, we must get it back. And the power station it can help us develop. Without Xia we can't do it," Tia said. "Aren't you just using him?" Shilami said. "For the tribe I can sacrifice anything. I can do anything." Tia's tone was very firm. This was the belief that she had held onto all her life. "But on the way here I was intimate with him, but you didn't object. Why? You're stupid. This is the outside world, not our tribe. The outside world is a man's world. You have to understand a man's mind. That is, the more unobtainable something is, the more precious it is. If you casually give it to him and satisfy his desires, he won't cherish you. If he really likes you, you can use this to fight for the greater benefits of our tribe." Elder Tia said. Shilami was silent. She suddenly felt that she didn't understand her chieftain at all. The chieftain who used to be like a big sister had become a stranger at this time. And the one who made Tia change her stance was Charlotte himself. At first, Tia thought that Charlotte was just a special agent from China who came to the tribe to rescue the hostages. However, after coming into contact with Charlotte, she realized that Charlotte's identity was not as simple as an ordinary special agent. He had a very special and high status in China. If not, why would the Americans go through so much trouble to deal with him? With such an important person, she could no longer treat Charlotte as an ordinary prisoner of war and give him to Shilami to be her man. More importantly, on the way here, Tia indirectly learned about Charlotte's other identity as a businessman. When she found out that Charlotte owned a military factory in China, her appetite was no longer limited to a small hydroelectric power station. She wanted more. Everything was for the tribe. As she learned more about Xia Lei, Tia of the Great Moon Empire came up with a plan that only she knew. In the living room, Long Bing and Charlotte were sitting on a sofa each, talking face to face. "You didn't manage to save him, but you brought back 2 beautiful Hun girls. I'm waiting for you to explain it to me." Long Bing's face was expressionless, and her tone was flat, as if she was talking about something like a 50-cent increase in the price of eggs today. Charlotte slowly told her what had happened, from him and Tang Yuyen entering Peshawar, to the attack in Afghanistan, to the capture of the White Hun tribe, and finally reaching an agreement. The only thing he did not mention was the matter related to his father, Xia Changhe, and Yelena. Charlotte spoke for more than 10 minutes. After listening to Charlotte, Long Bing looked directly into Charlotte's eyes. How did you know that the sword of Attila was in Njinjian's hands? I didn't even know about such a thing. This is very important information. If we knew this information in advance, we wouldn't have sent you and Tang Yuyen to Afghanistan to rescue those experts. We would have gotten the sword and exchanged it with the White Hun tribe. Charlotte had already prepared the answer. Information doesn't appear by itself. I got this information by chance. And Jinjian's son, An Xiuxian, was Shentu Tianin's pursuer. He told Shentu Tianin a lot about his family. The sword of Attila was his father's proudest collection, and he invited Shentu Tianin to admire it. You know my relationship with Shentu Tianin. I accidentally overheard An Xiuxian and Shentu Tianin's conversation, but I didn't pay much attention at the time. Later, when we were in Afghanistan, our second guide was the Whitestone tribe's elder, Brad. He talked to me about the history of the White Hun tribe and mentioned the sword of Attila. I suddenly remembered that the sword of Attila was in Njinjian's hands. In the end, I used this information to reach this deal with Attila. She accidentally overheard An Xiuxian showing off his family's sword of the Hun to Shentu Tianin, and then pushed the blame onto the dead Brad. Even if it was Long Bing, she wouldn't be able to dig up Brad's body and ask if it was true, right? This is really a coincidence, Long Bing said with a sigh. Charlotte said, how else? How do you think I got this information? From the CIA in America? Long Bing avoided Charlotte's angry gaze and said, you know that's not what I meant. I just want to understand what happened, and I have to report it to Boss Sure. Charlotte sighed in his heart. Even 101 innings couldn't get this information, but his father, Xia Changhe, knew it. He didn't know if he should feel proud or troubled by this. The compass is already in my hands, but I can't give it to you for the time being, Charlotte said. Why? Long Bing looked at Charlotte again. Charlotte said, in addition to the hostage rescue deal, I also made a deal with the chief of the White Hun tribe, Taya. I built a small hydropower station for the White Hun tribe, and she promised me that I could go to their holy land to dig for treasures for a day. I need the compass to guide me to the exact location and complete the excavation. Without the compass, I can't do this. No problem, but the excavated things must be handed over to the country, Long Bing said. Of course I have to hand it over to the country. Charlotte said, so I will give the budget for 101 innings, plus the $500,000 I paid to Brad. I hope the higher-ups will transfer the money to me. Hee, what are you laughing at? Millions of dollars, and you even want to build a hydropower station. Although you solved the problem, the way you solved the problem is too extravagant. The budget for 101 innings is limited. Even CEO Sure will have a headache with so much money. I don't know if he will approve it to you. You can pay for it first, Long Bing said. Charlotte smiled bitterly and said, am I your consultant or your sponsor? I haven't figured it out. Let me tell you, even if the money can't be returned to me in 101 innings, you have to compensate me through other channels, such as giving my company a big order or something. It was indeed difficult for a department like 101 innings to come up with so much money, but it was not a problem to get the order and earn the money back through other channels. You are becoming more and more like a profiteer. Well, I think there is no problem in this case. I will have a good talk with CEO Sure. Long Bing got up and said, I have to go back to 101 innings to see CEO Sure. I have already sent people to protect these two women. You don't have to accompany them. You can go to your military factory to take a look and then make a plan of action. It must be fast. It is best if you can give me a plan of action tomorrow. Well, I have been away for more than a month. It is time to take a look, Charlotte said. Long Bing left first. Charlotte knocked on the door of Big Moon Tia and Shalami's room. The two women from the White Hun tribe had already taken a bath and put on Tang Yuyen's pajamas. One of them was tall and beautiful, while the other had a childlike face. Their appearance and figure were a combination of the double characteristics of an angel and a devil, deeply attractive. "Xia, are you taking me to buy clothes?" Shalami said happily. In her heart, she thought that Charlotte would take her shopping alone, and then she would, however. Charlotte took out a card from his wallet and threw it to Big Moon Tia. "There is $100,000 in this card. You can buy whatever you want. The password is 6 zeros. You want us to go shopping by ourselves?" Big Moon Tia frowned. "I have other things to deal with. You don't have to worry. We will send people to protect you. Believe me, this is China. No one dares to behave atrociously here." Charlotte did not explain further. He turned around and left. Shalami's eyes were filled with disappointment. "Shalami, let's go shopping. We have a lot of things to buy." Big Moon Tia's mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. "Can you buy clothes for me?" "Of course. I will give you $500 to buy clothes." Shalami was speechless. Chapter 313. In the past month or so, Charlotte had been through life and death in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in Whitestag town in the capital, the Thunder Horse Arms factory had changed a lot. The production workshop had been built, and the relevant equipment had been installed. They could start production as soon as the production staff was in place. Behind the factory, a 3-story villa rose from the ground. It had a unique design and was surrounded by flowers and trees. The environment was beautiful. It was the residence built for Anina, and it was Charlotte's home in the capital. "Everything is going well. We'll start production next week." On the way, Qin Xiang said to Charlotte, "If you didn't come back, I wouldn't know what to do." Charlotte said, "You've worked hard during this time. It's no problem for us to start production in a week. I have something I want to ask you for help this week." "What is it?" Qin Xiang smiled. Every time Charlotte asked him for help, it was not an ordinary thing. It was always thrilling and exciting, and he was willing to do it. Charlotte whispered something in Qin Xiang's ear, then looked at him. "Is there a problem?" "To Korea." Qin Xiang giggled. "No problem. When are we leaving?" "The day after tomorrow," Charlotte said. "But you'll go back to Haiju with me tomorrow." "No problem. I'll work with you. There's nothing in this world that we can't steal." Qin Xiang was already eager to try. "Then wait for my call. I'll call you when I'm done here." Charlotte patted Qin Xiang's shoulder and walked to the villa behind the factory. Qin Xiang smiled and said, "Give her a good reward. She's really tired out during this period." Charlotte knew what Qin Xiang was talking about. He smiled awkwardly but didn't respond and continued to walk to the villa. The she that Qin Xiang mentioned was naturally Anina. It was thanks to her that the military factory could be built. From the purchase of equipment to the recruitment of talents, Anina was in charge of all these matters. It could be said that without Anina's professional knowledge and painstaking efforts, this military factory would not exist. What was Anina doing now? Actually, he only needed to use his left eye to get the answer, but Charlotte didn't do that. Compared to seeing what Anina was doing at a glance, he preferred to maintain this sense of mystery and then quietly approach her to give her a surprise. Outside the villa stood an agent from 101 innings. He was sent by Long Bing to protect Anina. Seeing Charlotte coming over, he greeted Charlotte with a nod. Charlotte also greeted him and then entered the villa. There was no one in the living room. Charlotte went upstairs. There was no one in the bedroom upstairs. Finally, Charlotte came to the study. The door in the study was gently closed, leaving a gap. Through the gap, he peeked at Anina, who was drawing in the study. Golden hair, azure eyes that were like gemstones, and a sexy figure. She was still so beautiful and hot, just like the first time he met her. Charlotte gently pushed the door open and walked in. Anina was still buried in the drawing and did not notice that there was one more person in the study. What a workaholic! Charlotte was touched. He quietly went behind Anina and then gently covered her eyes. He said gently, "Guess who I am?" When her eyes were covered, Anina froze for a moment. When she heard Charlotte's voice, she suddenly cheered. "Lucas, you're back." Charlotte let go of her eyes and said with a smile, "Can't you cooperate with me and guess who I am?" As soon as his voice fell, Anina had already burrowed into his arms, and a pair of soft cherry lips blocked his mouth. The longing was so strong that there was no need for words at this time. This kiss was just a starting point. The two of them were entangled in the study. Their clothes fell to the ground one by one, and happy sounds echoed in the study for a long time. After a long time, the two of them were quiet. But before Charlotte put on a piece of clothing, Anina pulled him to the desk and discussed the drawing with her. Charlotte sat on the office chair, and she sat on Charlotte's lap. On the desk was the drawing of a sniper rifle. It had a smooth shape and the most advanced technology. If such a sniper rifle was made, Charlotte felt that it would not be any worse than those world-class famous guns. It might even be better than those world-class famous guns, such as the Barrett M99, the M110, and the AWP. After carefully looking at the drawing, Charlotte said, "Anina, you designed our first sniper rifle so beautifully, and its functions are so advanced. Its complexity is also beyond my expectations. Can our military factory make it?" He was a businessman. The first thing he had to consider was not whether this sniper rifle was one of the best sniper rifles in the world. The first thing he had to consider was whether it could be made and whether it could be sold. If it couldn't be made because it was too good and too advanced, what was the use of a good design? Anina said, "It is indeed a little difficult, but I believe we can make it. Lucas, the design of this sniper rifle has my father's heart and soul in it. He can no longer complete this design, so I took it out of my head and perfected it. I have a feeling that as long as we can make it, it will become the most advanced and powerful sniper rifle in the world. Thunder Horse Military Factory will also become famous." Charlotte was moved. "All right, since it is your father's and your father's heart and soul, we will complete it. I don't believe that I can't make a sniper rifle if I can even make Joseph's smart machine tool. Let's do it. I knew you would like it." A smile appeared on Anina's pretty face. She moved back a little. Xia Lei's brows immediately furrowed, and the look in his eyes was completely different. "I will take care of the drawing. Let's talk about the smart machine tool now. To make this sniper rifle, we need the most advanced machine tool. I can't do this, so it will be up to you." "No problem. You do what you can first. I will take care of the smart machine tool." Charlotte's frown slowly relaxed. There was no machine tool in his mind anymore. "Then let's talk about cutting the ribbon. Can't you discuss it honestly?" "No." Discussing problems with Anina, a naturalist, would often create more problems. This was Charlotte's experience. The next morning, Charlotte left Thunder Horse Military Factory and drove back to Tang Yuyen's house in the city. After one night, Big Moon Tia and Sairami were no longer tribal women. Both of them gave people a feeling of being dazzled. Big Moon Tia was wearing a long black dress. Her slender figure was very suitable for this kind of dress. The graceful curves of her body were all outlined. She had a voluptuous figure and was mature and alluring. The black color also added a bit of calmness and seriousness to her, which was very suitable for her identity as a tribal chief. Sairami's upper body was wearing a round neck t-shirt. It was red and printed with a beautiful girl's cartoon pattern. Her pair of H-sized breasts pushed the cartoon t-shirt up high. It was so full that it looked as if it would fall down and smash two big holes on the ground at any time. It was very exaggerated. Her lower body was wearing a pair of sky blue jeans. It was the tight-fitting type, and one of her perky buttocks was wrapped round. Adding a bit more would make her look fat, and subtracting a bit more would make her look thin. In short, it was a natural and perfect shape that filled people with fantasies. Buddha makes the gold, and people make the clothes. After dressing up like this, Big Moon Tia and Sairami were obviously more beautiful and charming than before. However, Charlotte could still see at a glance that the clothes worn by Big Moon Tia and Sairami were not high-class goods. Big Moon Tia's long dress and shoes were at most 400 yuan. Sairami's denim casual clothes and a pair of domestic sports shoes were also not worth more than 400 yuan. I gave them 100,000 yuan, but they actually went to buy cheap goods. What did they do with the rest of the money? Charlotte was a little curious, but he did not bring it up. After giving the money to Big Moon Tia, he had never thought of asking for it back. Big Moon Tia seemed to see something in Charlotte's eyes. She said, "I'm going to buy some gifts for the children in the tribe with the rest of the money. Is that okay?" Charlotte smiled. Of course. Afghanistan was a very poor country. The White Hun tribe lived an isolated life, so they were extremely poor. To the White Hun tribe, 100,000 yuan was not a small amount of wealth. As the chief, Big Moon Tia would definitely not use the money that Charlotte gave her to buy branded clothes for Sairami and herself. That was not the life that she and Sairami needed. "Xia, when do we start?" Sairami asked. Charlotte said, "I was just about to discuss this with you. I want you to stay here. Within a week, I will return with the sword of Attila, and then we will return to your tribe." "We're not going to participate in the operation?" Sairami looked very surprised. Big Moon Tia also frowned. "How can we do that? The sword of Attila is our sacred relic. We want to personally take back what belongs to us." Charlotte said, "The sword is hidden in Korea. Do you understand Korean? Besides shooting people, what else can you do? If you go, you won't be helping, but making trouble. My operation might fail because of your participation. There is only one chance. I thought for a long time last night, and it's best that you stay here. You just need to bring the sword of Attila back. Why care about the process?" "Xia, I want to go with you," Sairami stubbornly said. "My marksmanship is very good. I won't be a burden to you." Charlotte shook his head. "You're looking at things too simply. This is not a competition of marksmanship. It's a competition of tactics, IQ, and some skills that you're not good at. I do need help, but not gunmen, but professionals. But Sairami still did not give up. Big Moon Tia interrupted Sairami. "Sairami, we'll stay. Xia is right. We just need to bring the sword of Attila back to the tribe. As for the process, we don't need to care." Sairami pouted. She was still not happy, but she did not dare to go against Big Moon Tia's opinion. Then it's settled. You stay, and I will bring the sword of Attila back within a week," Charlotte said. After a while, Charlotte left Tang Yuyen's house. He dialed Long Bing's number. "Hello, Long Bing, I'm ready. Let's meet." Long Bing's voice came from the phone. "Okay." Chapter 314. Only then did Charlotte know Tang Buochuan's identity in the 101 innings. He was a tactical planner. Most of the operations in the 101 innings were planned by him, and it was the same this time. Meanwhile, Xia Lei's plan of breaking into Njinjian's house to steal the sword of Attila was immediately rejected by him. "Do your best. I still have to go for a few days, so I have to go now." Charlotte patted Guan Lingshan's shoulder and prepared to leave. China and Korea had extensive economic and trade cooperation, and God's Domain Group was one of the three largest financial groups alongside Samsung and Hyundai. It had a very important position in Korea. If such a thing was discovered, it would definitely have a very serious negative impact. Compared to these negative impacts, the deaths of Tang Yuyen, Peaceful, and the other experts were actually a small matter. "I'm going to Korea tomorrow." Shintu Tianyin broke the silence. We have a cooperation project with God's Domain Group. I'm going there to participate in the groundbreaking ceremony. Are you free? I want you to come with me. A small passenger plane flew directly from Kyoto Airport to Haiju. There were only 5 passengers on the plane: Long Bing, Tang Buchuan, Kujie, Qin Xiang, and Charlotte. The story between the two of them was enough to be written into a book, but this book was still a blank page. Not a single word had been written. Because of a political project. I want to build a hydroelectric power station for a tribe in Afghanistan and then develop the area. The tribe is very poor, and a goat is the family's entire fortune. I want to build the area and obtain the rights to mine the resources there. This is also a mutually beneficial thing. On the way there, Charlotte had already thought of an answer. He had said everything he could say, and he would not mention anything that he could not say. Charlotte said awkwardly, "Uncle Ren, what are you talking about? As soon as I came back, I went straight to your place. I was in Afghanistan, so I really couldn't make a call." Charlotte said, "No problem. I need his help for this operation, and he's an expert in this area." Charlotte laughed. "I'm serious, but you have to take care of the plane tickets, and you have to treat me to good food." "No, we don't need to produce it ourselves this time," Charlotte said. "You just need to spend money to buy them. But you have to remember one thing, and that is to buy equipment from wherever it's easy to transport. Equipment companies in India and Pakistan are also fine. I want to settle this as soon as possible." "All right, I understand what you mean. Don't worry, Director Xia, I will get this done as soon as possible," Guan Lingshan said. Charlotte was silent for a while before he finally nodded. "I understand what you mean. Although I don't want to get Shintu Tianyin involved, saving people is more important. I will contact her and go to Korea with her. It's me, Tianyin, Charlotte." Guan Lingshan said, "Mr. Xia, do you mean to let our company produce the equipment needed for the hydropower station?" Shintu Tianyin smiled. "Dad, don't you feel comfortable if you don't praise Charlotte 3 times a day? I work so hard, but you don't praise me even once." After the plane took off, Tang Buchuan kept talking with Charlotte and showed Charlotte all kinds of information and blueprints. "I can't explain it clearly over the phone. I just came back. Where are you?" "I'm coming to find you." According to our information, the Wanxiang Corporation and the God Domain Corporation are going to lay down the foundation for a joint project in 2 days. Shintu Tianyin will represent the Wanxiang Corporation to hold a groundbreaking ceremony within Xiuxian. With your relationship with Shintu Tianyin, this is an opportunity you can take advantage of. After showing Charlotte a lot of information about the important figures in the God Domain Corporation, Tang Buchuan said to Charlotte. After leaving the airport, there was already a 101 floors car waiting by the roadside. Charlotte drove back to Lima Manufacturing Company and called Guan Lingshan to his office. Stealing the sword of Attila was only the first step. Building the hydropower station for the White Hun tribe was the second step. This matter had to be carried out in advance. Charlotte frowned. "Aren't you using her?" Charlotte nodded. He knew what to do without Tang Buchuan's reminder. Qin Xiang's face inexplicably blushed. After Shin Turan left, only Charlotte and Shintu Tianyin were left in the office. The two looked at each other and did not speak for a full minute. From a personal point of view, this kind of thing was not worth it. It was too dark and too depressing. But from the perspective of the country and the people, this kind of thing was great and worthy of respect. A few minutes later, Charlotte drove his BMW M6 away from Lima Manufacturing Company and headed for the Wanxiang Corporation. In the car, he called Shintu Tianyin. After a moment of silence, Charlotte said, "This is the last time I'll help you. After this, I won't do anything for you anymore." Charlotte said, "Yes, don't ask why. You'll be responsible for this." Tang Buchuan's lips curled into a smile. "Very good, but I still have to remind you not to tell her anything about this operation." Shin Turan laughed and said, "You're really bold. You even dared to invest in a place like Afghanistan. However, I admire your courage. Young people should have the courage to charge." He looked at Shintu Tianyin again. "Tianyin, you have to learn from Lazy. You see, he dared to invest in a place like Afghanistan. You lack his courage. I'm at the Wanxiang Corporation." "Come over," Shintu Tianyin said. Fu Mingmei came in and pushed Shin Turan's wheelchair away. "I'll treat you to Korean kimchi." Shintu Tianyin laughed and looked very happy. "That's settled. I'll have someone arrange it now." Charlotte retracted his hand. The two men looked at each other awkwardly. "Seriously, you didn't even make a phone call for a month." Shin Turan said with a slight reproach, "Have you forgotten this old man? President Xia, you want to build a hydropower station?" After listening to Charlotte, Guan Lingshan looked very surprised. "And it's in Afghanistan?" Looking at Qin Xiang, who was concentrating on the information and drawings, looking at his face that would make women jealous, Charlotte felt a faint sense of guilt and worry in his heart. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Qin Xiang, this operation is very dangerous. Once it's exposed, we won't get any protection. You still have time to change your decision. No matter what decision you make, I can understand." Charlotte said, "I went to Afghanistan, and I can't use my phone there." Charlotte nodded. "I'll contact her." "Really?" Charlotte was very tempted. He had been envious of Tang Yuyan's hidden weapon skills for a long time, but he had never been able to get in touch with the core secret. Some things were useless even if he had the ability to see through them. "Where have you been all this time?" Shintu Tianyin's voice was slightly excited. "I've looked for you several times this month, but your phone was turned off when I called you. I'm very worried about you." Shin Turan smiled. "Forget it. I know you don't want me here now. I'll go out. You guys talk." The plane landed at Haiju International Airport. Charlotte got off the plane, and the plane took off again, flying directly to Seoul, South Korea. This was the plan. Charlotte was in the open, and Qin Xiang, Tang Buchuan, Long Bing, and Ku Jie were in the dark. They would go to South Korea first to prepare for the operation. "Oh right." Guan Lingshan stopped Charlotte. "President Xia, Shintu Tianyin has called several times this month to ask about your situation. I don't know where you are, so I can't tell her." Charlotte smiled. "Well, it's been hard on you." A university graduate had managed to take charge of a company for Charlotte in less than a year. Not everyone in the workplace could have such an opportunity. This was not a lie. Even if it was done in good faith. Shintu Tianyin was dressed in a black lady's suit. She had a cold and beautiful face, a perfect nine-headed body, and a powerful aura that was like that of a queen. The impression she gave off was still as strong and stunning as ever. Charlotte said, "Please tell old Master Tang that I will definitely bring Yuyan back safely." "Okay, I'll go with you," Charlotte said with a smile. Guan Lingshan adjusted the glasses on the bridge of her nose and looked a little shy. "President Xia, you don't have to be so polite with me. You promoted me and gave me everything I have now. I will do everything for you." "You went to Afghanistan? Really? What did you go to Afghanistan for?" Shintu Tianyin asked curiously. After arriving at the Vientiane building, Charlotte took the elevator to Shintu Tianyin's office. "What did you go to that place for?" Shintu Tianyin asked. She smiled when she saw Charlotte. Tang Buchuan smiled. "Brother Xia, it's useless to tell me that. You should talk to President Shi. However, my grandfather said that as long as you successfully rescue my sister, he will accept you as his disciple and teach you the unique skills of the Tang sect. Haven't you always wanted to learn? This is an opportunity and also a reward from the Tang sect for you." Qin Xiang raised her head and glanced at Xiaolei. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a beautiful smile. "Do you think I'm doing this for those people? That Tang guy left me to talk to you. Although I don't know what you talked about, I know their style. But I don't care, I only work for you. In addition to Shintu Tianyin, Charlotte also saw Shin Turin. What surprised Xia Lei was that Shin Turin had grown a little fatter, and the complexion on his face had improved a lot, giving people a feeling that he was in high spirits. This was probably the reason why he was in Shintu Tianyin's office. His body was gradually recovering, and he had begun to help Shintu Tianyin deal with the company's affairs. I don't care, I only work for you. It was just a few simple words, but it was as heavy and tall as a mountain, and no power could shake it. Charlotte was moved. He held Qin Xiang's hand, but didn't know how to express it. Tang Buchuan said, "This is not using you. You just need to go to Korea with Shintu Tianyin. You act in the light and we act in the dark. There is only one chance for this operation, and it can't cause any negative impact, so it must be foolproof. Otherwise, my sister and those experts will die in the White Hun tribe. Do you understand what I mean?" A bitter smile appeared on the corner of Charlotte's mouth. He was very clear about what Tang Buchuan meant. This kind of thing often appeared in spy movies. Agents risked their lives for the country. Once the operation failed, even their identity would not be recognized, and they would even be killed by their own people. Tang Buchuan was not only reminding Qin Xiang, but he also reminded her. He just didn't say it out loud. "Are your people reliable?" Tang Buchuan looked at Qin Xiang, who was sitting in the back, with vigilance in his eyes. Shintu Tianyin was a little surprised that Charlotte agreed so readily. "Don't lie to me, I'm serious." After hanging up the phone, Charlotte stepped on the accelerator, and the black BMW M6 rushed on the road like a beast. He was not worried at all that he would be caught speeding, nor did he worry about the traffic police punishing him for illegal driving. This was probably one of the few benefits he got from 101 innings. Tang Buchuan said, "Then it's decided. This operation will not be recognized. You have to remind your people that they can't fail. If they fail, they must keep their mouths shut. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to deal with." After the conversation with Tang Buchuan, Charlotte came to Qin Xiang with the information and drawings given by Tang Buchuan and handed them to Qin Xiang. "Uncle Ren, Tianyin, hello." Charlotte smiled and greeted them. Chapter 315. Incheon International Airport, South Korea. At the arrival hall, Charlotte saw An Xiuxian and the dozens of bodyguards that An Xiuxian had brought with him. The bodyguards were all wearing black suits, headphones, and sunglasses. All of them looked very professional and cold. This scene was obviously prepared by An Xiuxian for Shintu Tianyin. He wanted to show off the power of his family in South Korea. It was a big scene for one person to bring dozens of bodyguards, and few people had the ability to do it. However, this scene was nothing in Xia Lei's eyes. Compared to when he single-handedly challenged dozens of American special forces in Afghanistan, or when he faced the hundreds of female warriors led by Taya of the Great Moon Empire in the White Hun tribe, this scene was nothing. Shintu Tianyin only brought 2 female assistants, Fu Mingmei and Charlotte, so the scene was much smaller. Seeing the dozens of cold bodyguards, Shintu Tianyin's 2 assistants also showed exaggerated expressions. Then, they secretly observed their queen. Their queen seemed to be a little moved, but it was not obvious. "Do you have to be so exaggerated?" Fu Mingmei said disapprovingly, "We're here to attend the groundbreaking ceremony, not to fight." Then, she nudged Charlotte with her elbow and teased, "Mr. Xia, you have to be careful. That kid has been crazily pursuing Sister Tianyin recently. If you come along, he might make things difficult for you." Charlotte smiled. "If he makes things difficult for me, I'll make sure he has no shoes to wear." Hee. Fu Mingmei was amused by Charlotte. Shintu Tianyin glared at Fu Mingmei and she stopped laughing. The 2 sides met in the arrival hall. And Xiuxian saw Charlotte standing next to Shintu Tianyin, and his face suddenly darkened. He looked very unhappy. Charlotte was not surprised by Enchantment's reaction at all. He pretended not to see it. Before he obtained the sword of Attila, he would not provoke Enchantment. He was even prepared to be ridiculed by Enchantment. If that happened, he would choose to endure it. Not for anything else, but for Tang Yuyan and Peaceful, who were still trapped in the White Hun tribe, as well as the experts from China. Tianyin, I came an hour earlier. And Xiuxian shifted his gaze away from Charlotte and faced Shintu Tianyin with a gentle and elegant smile. It's good that you're here. Let's go. You don't have to stay in a hotel. Let your attendants stay in a hotel. You can stay in my house. If that's the case. Shintu Tianyin frowned slightly. I don't think that's a good idea, right? I'd better stay in a hotel. How can you do that? And Xiuxian said. You're here in Korea. Don't you want me to be your host? Shintu Tianyin looked at Charlotte. His attitude did not change. I appreciate your kindness, but I came with Charlotte. I can't let him stay in a hotel alone. And Xiuxian's gaze fell on Charlotte's face again. He did not hide his disgust and displeasure. He had not expected Charlotte to come to Korea with Shintu Tianyin. It was a rare opportunity for him to have Shintu Tianyin come to Korea, but he had not expected Charlotte to come with him. Was he trying to make things difficult for him? In his eyes, Charlotte was as annoying as a fly. Charlotte still pretended not to see in Xiuxian's rotten face. He said with a smile, Tianyin, I'm afraid Mr. N doesn't have any extra rooms in his house. I don't think we should disturb him. Let's stay in a hotel. Shintu Tianyin nodded. There was no superfluous words. It was just a shallow nasal sound. But Xiuxian looked as if he had drunk a big bottle of vinegar. What did you say? Do you think I will have extra rooms in my house? Not to mention the few of you, even if you call everyone in your small company, I can still find a place to stay. He was obviously mocking Charlotte's Lima Manufacturing Company. It was just a small company. In Xiuxian's eyes, Charlotte and Lima Manufacturing Company were not worth mentioning. Charlotte was not angry at all. I'm just joking. Mr. N, please don't mind me. If it's not convenient, we'd better stay in a hotel. I don't want to trouble you. Humph. And Xiuxian coldly snorted. He didn't want to talk to him. He said to Shintu Tianyin, Tianyin, how about this? You and your entourage will stay in my house. My dad wants to see you. Knowing that you're coming, he declined several important social engagements to accompany you. Mr. N is really considerate. Thank you in advance. Shintu Tianyin looked at Charlotte, seeking his opinion. You see, Charlotte said, since Mr. N has kindly invited us, then we'll stay in his house. He smiled. Don't we have an old saying? It's hard to refuse hospitality. If we insist on staying in a hotel, it would be impolite. Shintu Tianyin smiled shallowly. Well, we'll stay in his house. Asking for Charlotte's opinion on such a matter made Xiuxian even more unhappy. He secretly said in his heart, this fly is really disgusting. What is he doing here? The cooperation between the Wanxiang Group and the Divine Domain Group has nothing to do with his small company. Is he purely looking for someone to hate? I really want to kick him back. Although Xiuxian thought like this in his heart, he still had a good-looking smile on his face. Okay, let's go. Charlotte was relieved in his heart. If he stayed in a hotel, he wouldn't be looked down upon by Xiuxian. But for the sword of Attila, he would rather be looked down upon by Xiuxian. Only then would he have the opportunity to touch the sword of Attila. Walking out of the arrival hall, 10 Mercedes-Benz cars slowly drove over and parked on the side of the road. And Xiuxian invited Shintu Tianyin to sit in his car. It was a Bugatti Veyron that cost tens of millions. This time, Shintu Tianyin didn't refuse. After all, she had to take Xiuxian's pride into consideration. Charlotte and Fu Mingmei sat in a car. Then, under the lead of Xiuxian's Bugatti Veyron, The motorcade left the airport and headed in the direction of Seoul. You haven't shown up for more than a month. Where have you been? Fu Mingmei asked Charlotte in the Mercedes-Benz car. Charlotte shifted his gaze outside the window. He saw a black Chevrolet Suburban parked by the side of the road. A person was sitting in the driver's seat and looking in his direction. That person was Long Bing. She was wearing a baseball cap and a pair of sunglasses. Her hair was also somewhat styled. When Charlotte saw her at first glance, he almost didn't recognize her. Then, Charlotte saw Tang Buchuan sitting in the passenger seat. He didn't see Qin Xiang, but he could guess that Qin Xiang was probably active near the family at this moment, preparing for the upcoming sword theft operation. A smile appeared at the corner of Charlotte's mouth. With the help of Long Bing and Tang Buchuan, and Qin Xiang as a partner, the success rate of this operation was very high. Now, all he needed to do was enter the family, find the place where the sword was hidden, and then make his move. Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you ignoring me? Fu Mingmei patted Charlotte's shoulder, a little displeased. Only then did Charlotte look away from the window. He smiled and said, I'm going to Afghanistan. Why are you going to Afghanistan? To buy a goat. I'm going to open a shop that sells goat soup. Screw you. Fu Mingmei rolled her eyes at Charlotte. I wanted to tell you a secret, but with your attitude, I think I should forget it. We're old friends. What's wrong with joking? I'm really going to Afghanistan to invest and buy mines. It's all business. You won't be interested. Charlotte said something nice and then asked, What secret do you want to tell me? Gu Qian is back, Fu Mingmei said. She wasn't really angry with Charlotte. Charlotte was slightly stunned. Tell me, what happened? Although the Gu family had fallen, Gu Qian hadn't been arrested. Given her character, she definitely wouldn't let it go. Although Charlotte didn't care about Gu Qian, who had lost the North Group, it was necessary to be wary of her. Fu Mingmei said, she came to Sister Tianyin. She wants to cooperate with Sister Tianyin. Cooperate with what? You might not believe it, but she actually helped Tianyin buy the Gu family's former business. Fu Mingmei's expression was a little strange. With her help, Tianyin's acquisition of the Gu family's business went smoothly. During the month you were away, almost 1/5 of the North Group's business was transferred to the Wanxiang Group. There's such a thing? Why did Gu Qian do that? Charlotte was very curious, but at the same time, he was also a little worried. He had once reminded Shintu Tianyin not to buy the Gu family's assets, but now it seemed that she didn't take his words to heart at all. He also understood why Shintu Tianyin didn't tell him about this matter. It was because Shintu Tianyin's opinion on this matter was completely different from his. Of course, Gu Qian wouldn't do it for nothing. Tianyin gave her a lot of commission. Although I don't know the specific amount, it's definitely more than 100 million. After all, without her help, some popular assets couldn't have been bought. Charlotte was silent for a moment before saying, Gu Qian is not a person who can cooperate with you. You should persuade your daughter not to get too close to Gu Qian. The immediate benefits are tempting, but some money can't be earned. I told you this secret because I wanted you to persuade Sister Tianyin. Instead, you asked me to persuade her. Do you think she will listen to me with my identity? Fu Mingmei said. Charlotte smiled bitterly. I tried to persuade her, but she wouldn't listen to me. But since you told me, I'll persuade her again when I have the chance. That's more like it. A smile appeared on Fu Mingmei's face. I'll tell you another secret. What other secrets? It's related to you. Related to me? Charlotte became more and more curious. Fu Mingmei smiled and said, And Xiuxian has been crazily pursuing Tianyin these days. Even if he's not in China, someone will come to send flowers to Tianyin every day. He calls Tianyin every day and has endless things to say every time. I really wonder if he has an emotional expert around him to plan these things for him. You have to be careful. Don't think that you have nothing to worry about. Women are easily moved by sweet words. If one day Tianyin is moved, won't you have no chance? Charlotte smiled. What does this have to do with me? You're so lazy to pick up girls. I'm impressed. Fu Mingmei rolled her eyes at Charlotte. If I were Tianyin, I would definitely choose an Xiuxian and divorce you. Charlotte was speechless. Chapter 316. Every inch of land in Seoul was worth its weight in gold, but to Jinjian it was nothing. The inn residence was located in the wealthy district of Seoul. Just the plot of land alone was more than 100 mu, and there were carefully constructed ornamental gardens and over 100 ancient-style buildings. From afar, it looked like the residence of an ancient king. And Xiuxian also wanted to show off. She deliberately circled around Jinjian's residence before entering through the main entrance. This circle took about 10 minutes, and the area was astonishingly large. Charlotte sat in the car and observed the inn residence and its surroundings without batting an eyelid. The scenery that he saw with his left eye was like a photograph or a video, and he would never forget it. With this kind of ability, he indeed had the ability to become a top-notch godly thief. The motorcade entered the inn residence and followed an asphalt road for at least 50 meters before reaching the residential area. An ancient-style palace was at the very front. It looked very much like the Chongwadi, just a lot smaller. Behind it was a continuous stretch of ancient-style houses. They were scattered all over the place in a picturesque manner. Some were standing by the pond, while others revealed a corner of the eaves amidst the green bamboos. Everywhere exuded an imposing aura. Shintu Tianyin was also a woman with a net worth of tens of billions, but her family's old residence paled in comparison to the inn residence in front of her. However, in terms of foundation, the Shintu family and the inn family couldn't compare. The Shintu family had taken advantage of China's reform and opening up to develop in a short 30 years, while the inn family had developed over several generations. A group of people stood in front of the Chongwadi Palace, led by a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s. He was tall and thin, and his face was thin. His eyes were full of spirit, and he gave off a feeling of being hale and hearty, wise and mature. Although this was the first time they had met, Charlotte had already recognized him. This man was Xiuxian's father, Jinjian. He also recognized the woman standing beside Jinjian. That slightly plump, but still charming middle-aged woman was Xiuxian's mother, Su Xiuzhen. According to the information provided by Tang Buchuan, he also knew that this woman used to be a famous celebrity in Korea. Other than Jinjian and Su Xiuzhen, he also recognized the housekeeper and several other important people standing behind them. Although it was his first time here, he could recognize almost everyone in the inn family. Those he couldn't recognize were at least the insignificant servants and bodyguards. And Xiuxian and Shintu Tianyin got out of the car. And Jinjian brought his wife over and greeted Shintu Tianyin with a smile. Miss Shintu, my wife and I are deeply honored to have you visit our humble abode. And Jinjian also spoke fluent Chinese. His Korean accent wasn't too obvious. Shintu Tianyin shook hands with Jinjian, a smile on his face. Uncle An, you must be joking. How is this a humble abode? This place of yours is practically a royal residence from ancient times. I am deeply honored to be here as a guest. And Jinjian laughed. Haha, Miss Shintu really knows how to talk. Su Xiuzhen also walked in front of Shintu Tianyin and shook hands with Shintu Tianyin. Then she smiled and said, Miss Shintu, you are really beautiful. I have seen many young girls, but it is my first time seeing such a beautiful and noble girl like you. I am so happy. Shintu Tianyin smiled and said, Auntie Su, you really know how to talk. I am not as good as you say, but thank you for praising me. My mom is speaking the truth. And Xiuxian said in a very gentle voice, Tianyin, you are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. Shintu Tianyin only smiled and didn't say anything. Su Xiuzhen pretended to reprimand her son. You brat, why aren't you inviting Miss Shinto in to sit? And Xiuxian followed and said, Tianyin, let's go in and sit. Have a cup of tea and rest. I will take you for a walk. Okay. Shinto Tianyin turned his head to look at Charlotte and Fu Mingmei, who were standing behind him, and then said, Mingmei Lei, come over. I will introduce you. The smile on Xiuxian's face immediately disappeared, and Jin Jian and Su Xiuxian's gazes also shifted to Charlotte. The couple's reactions were indifferent. Clearly, they didn't see Charlotte as someone important, especially Su Xiuxian. She seemed to have heard something, and her gaze towards Charlotte was not friendly. Charlotte braced himself and walked over. For the sake of the mission, he had to endure even if she rolled her eyes at him. Shinto Tianyin made a simple introduction, and Jin Jian and Su Xiuxian's reactions were still very indifferent. The couple only looked at Charlotte with indifferent gazes and didn't greet him at all. Charlotte had a smile on his face and very politely said, Hello, Mr. and hello, Madam Su. After saying that, he extended his hands towards Jin Jian. Extending both hands to shake the other's hands was a way of expressing respect. However, Jin Jian didn't even extend his hand. He only said indifferently, I will have someone arrange a place for you to stay. If there is anything you need, just let the housekeeper know. Su Xiuxian waved at an old man, and the old man followed her over. Su Xiuxian said something to him in Korean, and the old man indicated for Charlotte, Fu Mingmei, and the other two assistants to follow him. Charlotte knew this old man's identity. He was called Choi Myung-hoo, and he was the family's housekeeper. And Xiuxian's lips curled into a cold smile. Although he didn't say anything, one could see the deep contempt and arrogance in his eyes. Without a doubt, whether it was in Jin Jian, Su Xiuxian, or in Xiuxian, only Shinto Tianyin was someone with the same status as them, and the person their family received was only Shinto Tianyin. As for Charlotte, in their eyes, he was just a lowly follower. He wasn't even worthy of shaking hands. Charlotte awkwardly retracted his hand. A hint of displeasure flashed in Shinto Tianyin's eyes, but she didn't show it this time. After all, the other party was a veteran political figure in South Korea. He was also the chairman of the Divine Domain Corporation. Even she had to give him face. Charlotte and Fu Mingmei followed the housekeeper, Choi Myung-hoo, to a house. Shinto Tianyin was worried that Charlotte wouldn't be happy, so she said, Lei, I'll come find you in a bit. Charlotte turned around and smiled. It's fine. You can chat with Mr. and don't worry about me. Seeing that Charlotte still had a smile on his face, Shinto Tianyin finally breathed a sigh of relief. She also smiled and nodded. Choi Myung-hoo brought Charlotte, Fu Mingmei, and the two assistants to a row of guest rooms. He casually opened a door and signaled Charlotte to go in. Then, he said in Korean, Sir, this is your room. Please go in. Charlotte understood Korean. At this time, he shook his head and pretended to be confused. Sir, what are you saying? I don't understand. Choi Myung-hoo repeated what he had just said. Charlotte shook his head again. I'm sorry. I still don't understand. Choi Myung-hoo looked at Fu Mingmei and the two assistants. He tentatively asked, Ladies, do any of you understand Korean? Fu Mingmei shook her head, but the two assistants nodded. The assistants that Shinto Tianyin brought to South Korea would definitely be those who knew some Korean. One of the assistants seemed to understand Choi Myung-hoo's meaning. Maybe he finally translated what Choi Myung-hoo had just said in his mind. After Choi Myung-hoo asked, he used Korean to translate Choi Myung-hoo's words to Charlotte. Charlotte looked like he suddenly understood. He smiled embarrassedly and then went into the room. Choi Myung-hoo took Fu Mingmei and the two assistants to another room. Charlotte closed the door and first looked around the room. Then, he used his left eye to search the entire room. After confirming that there were no cameras or bugs, he finally relaxed. He said to a button on his jacket, The players have entered the field. A second later, Long Bing's voice came from the mini receiver implanted in his ear. The referee is in place. This was a code word. It was a kind of insurance measure. After the first contact, Charlotte quietly stayed in the room for a while. Then, he used his X-ray vision to look at the room next door. In the room next door was Fu Mingmei. She was taking off her clothes and preparing to take a shower. Her figure was very good. She actually had a few obvious abdominal muscles. It could be seen that she usually had a very systematic fitness program. Charlotte's eyes stayed on Fu Mingmei's body for a few seconds and then moved away. Seeing a beautiful woman take off her clothes, for an ordinary man, it must be something that he couldn't bear to blink his eyes. But for him, it was as natural as breathing. He had seen it so many times that he had long been accustomed to it. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do it." Charlotte smiled bitterly and shook his head gently. Only then did he drive Fu Mingmei's white body out of his mind. Then, Charlotte used his X-ray vision to look around the room. He didn't find the collection room of the antique. It seemed that it was not in this area. 10 minutes later, there were footsteps outside the door. Charlotte's left eye moved slightly, and Cui Minghu entered the vision of his left eye. Cui Minghu came to the door of the room where Charlotte lived and reached out to knock on the door. What is he doing here? Charlotte was very curious. He walked over and opened the door. Cui Minghu said, "Mr. Xia, our Mr. Su Hyun invited you to have tea." Charlotte shook his head. "I don't understand." "Fool, why would I speak Korean to a fool?" Cui Minghu said with a smile. "Are you a fool?" Charlotte shook his head. "I don't understand." He secretly said in his heart, "You're just an old guard dog. Why are you so arrogant? What kind of family has what kind of housekeeper?" Cui Minghu didn't speak anymore. He made a gesture to Charlotte, a gesture to drink tea, and a gesture to follow him. "Oh, okay." Charlotte pretended to understand Cui Minghu's poor sign language, and said with a smile. Cui Minghu muttered as he walked, "This guy actually dared to compete with Mr. Su Hyun for a woman? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Do you deserve it? You're really stupid to the extreme. You're obviously a rival in love, but you still dare to come here. With this IQ, you're like a pig. Do you deserve it?" Hearing this, Xia Lei really wanted to kick him, but he still endured it in the end. It was easy to vent his anger. He just needed to kick him, but what else could he do other than feeling happy? After walking for a few minutes, Cui Minghu brought Charlotte to a door and opened it. "Mr. Xia, please go in and wait for a while. Mr. Su Hyun will be here soon." "What did you say?" Charlotte continued to pretend not to understand. Cui Minghu made a sign to Charlotte, but he said, "Get in, you pighead. You'll cry later." Charlotte's heart suddenly moved. Was this a trap? Chapter 317. Cui Minghu brought Charlotte into the room and left. He mumbled to himself as he walked, and there was a sinister smile on his lips, as if his plot had succeeded. Charlotte had quickly completed his reconnaissance of the room. There was nothing unusual about the room. There was a bed, an indoor bathroom, and a sofa. It was just a normal room. However, he soon found something wrong. The room was filled with a light fragrance, and there was a woman's underwear in the bedside table. Cui Minghu said that Xiaoxian invited him to tea, but of course, he did not believe it. Moreover, it was in a woman's room. However, why did Xiaoxian ask someone to bring him into a woman's room? Footsteps came from outside the room. Charlotte turned around and his left eye twitched slightly. The wooden wall disappeared from his left eye's field of vision. He saw a young woman walking in his direction. She was a typical Korean woman, a woman who came from the beauty production line. She had an all-shaped face, big eyes, a beautiful nose, and a shockingly large chest. It was impossible to find any fault with her. Unfortunately, all of this was fake. He could even see the silicone implanted in the woman's chest with his left eye, and the bridge of her nose that was padded with plastic. The woman was walking normally at first, but when she approached the room, she started to pull at her hair and clothes. In the blink of an eye, her hair was a mess, and her clothes were torn, revealing a large area of alluring white beauty. Everything was normal before, but now it was abnormal. The woman's bizarre actions made Xia Lei understand what she was trying to do. Without waiting for the woman to reach the door, he sprinted forward and kicked the pillar on the wall. Then, his whole body soared into the air and reached out to grab a beam. With a light swing, his body hit on the beam. A speck of dust floated down from his body, but it was not obvious. The woman did not knock on the door, but pushed it open. The first thing she did after entering the room was to rip off her shirt, and even her bra was pulled down to her neck, exposing the thing to feed the next generation. At the same time, she opened her mouth and screamed, "Help!" She only screamed once before she stopped because there was no one in the room. If there was no one in the room, how could she continue with this rape scene? "Where is he?" The woman looked left and right and even ran to the bathroom to take a look, but she couldn't find him. She was dumbfounded. "Damn it, didn't you say that he was in this room? What kind of joke was this? Who am I going to show my clothes to?" The Korean artificial beauty's expression was hilarious. She stomped her feet, turned around and walked out. Suddenly, a few bodyguards of the An family rushed in at the door, led by Cui Minghu, who left a few minutes ago. Several men's eyes fell on the woman's chest at the same time. The white, tender, and round place made their eyes stare straight. "Ah!" The woman screamed and hurriedly pulled down her bra, then covered up her torn shirt. Cui Minghu had obviously brought people to catch the pervert, but the pervert had disappeared. The bodyguards he brought along also looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. "What happened?" Cui Minghu asked anxiously. "Where is that kid?" The woman said, "I don't know. I didn't see anyone when I came in." "What are you doing?" Cui Minghu was angry. The woman rolled her eyes at Cui Minghu. "I'm the one asking you. You said he was here. I came and tore his clothes, but he was gone. What are you still doing? Go and find him for me." Cui Minghu was furious. Several bodyguards left the door, each in charge of one direction to look for the person. Cui Minghu and the woman complained to each other and left. Charlotte jumped down from the beam, patted the dust on his body, and then left the room. What happened just now was a despicable trick. He didn't know whether this idea was thought of by Xiaoxian herself, or by Xiaoxian's suggestion, or by Cui Minghu, the butler. If Xia Lei's reaction had been just a bit slower, that woman would have rushed into the room to tangle with him, and then Cui Minghu would have brought people over to catch the adulterer. Regardless of whether Shintu Tianyin believed it or not, and regardless of whether the Korean police would intervene, one thing was certain. He would definitely have been chased out of the An family. This trap didn't require much skill, but not all tricks to trick people required high skill. Sometimes this kind of simple trick was often the most effective. Unfortunately, Charlotte had a magical eye. This kind of trap without skill was just a farce to him. After leaving the room, Charlotte walked towards the palace that looked like Chongwadi. Along the way, he used X-ray vision on all the buildings, looking for Njinjian's antique collection room. He didn't find Njinjian's antique collection room, but Charlotte realized that the closer he got to the palace that looked like Chongwadi, the higher the security level. Many places were installed with cameras, and the number of bodyguards and equipment were obviously much higher than other places. Although he hadn't found Njinjian's antique collection room, Charlotte already had a premonition that he wasn't far from that place. "There!" Suddenly someone shouted. Charlotte looked in the direction of the voice, and then saw Cui Minghu and a few bodyguards running in his direction. It would be easy for the other party to find him as he swaggered around in the An residence. Behind Cui Minghu and a few bodyguards was the woman. Her clothes were still the torn clothes from before. She ran with a few men, her silicone-filled chest swaying. The scene was unbearable to look at. Chui Minghu and a few bodyguards surrounded Charlotte in the blink of an eye. The old Chui Minghu panted heavily, and his voice was intermittent. You actually dare continue to frame him? If that was the case, then it was too despicable. Not only did it not have any technical content, but was Xiaoxian only capable of this? Charlotte smiled and shook his head. Sorry, I don't understand what you're talking about. Chui Minghu turned around and gave the woman a look, indicating for her to do something. The woman hesitated for a moment, then walked over to Charlotte. Her hand, which was covering her chest, also seemed to be preparing to loosen it. At that moment, an Xiaoxian appeared at the end of the corridor, and beside him stood Shintu Tianin. What are you doing? An Xiaoxian asked loudly. Chui Minghu's expression was very strange. What he really wanted to say was, didn't you ask us to do this? And Xiaoxian said, do what you need to do. Don't make a racket here. There are no rules at all. Framing Charlotte for molesting an artificial beauty in front of Shintu Tianin, and Xiaoxian would not do such a thing. Chui Minghu looked at Charlotte, then looked at Chui Minghu, and then said, what are you still standing here for? There are no rules. The bodyguards quickly left, and the woman also left. What happened? Shintu Tianin walked towards Charlotte, with a look of concern in his eyes. Charlotte smiled. I don't know, I don't understand what they're saying. But, it seems like they're looking for someone? So that's how it is. I thought you were in trouble. Shintu Tianin said. Trouble? How could it be? This is Mr. An's house, there are a lot of bodyguards. Charlotte said. And Xiaoxian also came over with a smile on her face. Mr. Xia, my people didn't bring you any trouble, did they? Charlotte said. No, it's just that I don't understand what they're saying. After a pause, he said with some embarrassment, and Mr. An's house is really big, I actually got lost. I wanted to look for you, but I didn't expect to walk here. Shintu Tianin said, Xiaoxian, take us around. This place is really big and I can't figure out the direction. If it was Charlotte who made such a request, and Xiaoxian would definitely disdain it, but he wouldn't refuse Shintu Tianin's request. Okay, I'll take you around. Thank you, Mr. and Charlotte said politely. And Xiaoxian's eyes flashed with a look of disgust, but he still had a smile on his face. Let's go. The three of them wandered around the mansion, with Xiaoxian acting as a tour guide. From his words, Charlotte also learned that this mansion had a history of almost 200 years. It was a palace garden in the Qing dynasty. At that time, Korea was still a vassal state of the Qing dynasty in the Central Plains. This place was also specially used to receive imperial envoys and generals from the Qing dynasty. And in that period, the ancestors of the An family were officials of the imperial court. My ancestors were brave and mighty, and they made immortal contributions to the nation of Korea. My family still has the armor and saber left by my ancestors. Tianin, you may find it funny, but my dream is actually to be a general, not a businessman. And Xiaoxian spoke with fervor and assurance, like a son of an aristocratic family. He seemed to want to let Shintu Tianin know that in terms of family heritage, he and Xiaoxian was dozens of streets ahead of Charlotte, who came from a construction site. Shintu Tianin didn't have any obvious reaction, but just said lightly, is that so? If you can inherit the business of your ancestors, that's also good. And Xiaoxian smiled indifferently, his gaze also falling on Charlotte's face, a look of disdain and provocation in his eyes. Charlotte pretended not to see it and said, speaking of family history, our Xia family isn't simple either. Shintu Tianin immediately became interested. What history does your family have? I've never heard you mention it before. Tell me quickly, I want to know. Charlotte said with a smile, you know the great general of Wei during the period of the Three Kingdoms, Xiahou, right? That's my ancestor. Shintu Tianin was stunned for a moment, then he chuckled. Of course I know Xiahou Dun, but I think you're bragging. The smile on Xiaoxian's face instantly disappeared. He didn't care if Xiahou Dun was Charlotte's ancestor, but what he cared about was that Shintu Tianyin was actually smiling so happily. Shintu Tianyin had never smiled at him like this before. Was Xiahou Dun really his ancestor? Charlotte himself wasn't sure about this, but he still looked very serious. I'm telling the truth. My family still has the treasured sword passed down by my ancestor. It's so shiny that it can even reflect a person's shadow. Mr. N, do you think your ancestor's armor and saber can reflect a person's shadow? Ha ha ha! And Xiaoxian laughed out loud. Charlotte had an innocent look on his face. Mr. N, what are you laughing at? And Xiaoxian said, I'm laughing at how you don't know anything about shareholders, yet you still want to pretend to be an expert in front of me. It's impossible for an ancient sword to be shiny, let alone reflect a person's shadow. You probably bought a modern imitation to pass it off as an ancient sword, right? My family's treasured sword is fake, but does your family's ancestral saber have to be real? No one has seen it before, maybe it's a woodcutter. Charlotte said. Humph. And Xiaoxian said disdainfully, I'll take you to see a real ancient sword, to broaden your horizons. Shintu Tianyin quietly touched Charlotte's arm. You're making a fool of yourself. Charlotte didn't mind, because he had already guessed what Xiaoxian would take him to see. And that was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 3:18. The most majestic and imposing palace had a name, Yi's residence. It was where Jinjian, Su Xiuzhen, and Xiaoxian lived. It was also the place where they received important guests. They were important guests. If it wasn't for Xiaoxian leading the way, Charlotte wouldn't have been able to get close. In Jinjian and Su Xiuzhen's eyes, he wasn't an important guest at all. From the moment he got close to Yi's residence, Charlotte had been astutely observing everything. Where the cameras were installed, where the guards were, where he could hide, which route he could take to leave quickly, and so on. He had observed and considered everything. Entering the interior of Yi's residence, whether it was the furniture or the decorations, they were all made of expensive wood and antiques. Even the floor tiles were made of high-quality white marble. The level of luxury shocked Charlotte. Charlotte pretended to be jealous and envious, lowering his stance. He didn't look like a promising young man from China or a cutting-edge entrepreneur. Instead, he looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world, just like Granny Lu in Dream of the Red Chamber. And Xiaoxian's eyes were filled with disdain. She snickered in her heart. As expected of a small fry who came from a construction background, he has never seen the world. A living room can make him so surprised. If he goes to my father's collection room, won't he show his true colors? Seeing how bad Charlotte's performance was, Shintu Tianyin's eyes showed a hint of disappointment. She hoped that Charlotte would perform very well. She even hoped that Charlotte would be more outstanding than Xiaoxian. This was because the man she wanted had to be the most outstanding man in the world. However, the current Charlotte was far from what she had hoped for. However, regardless of whether it was in Xiaoxian or Shintu Tianyin's reactions, Xia Lei pretended not to see them. He pretended to admire the antiques and ornaments in the comfort house, or the exquisite works of art. At the same time, he used the ability of his left eye to see through the entire comfort house. What puzzled Charlotte was that he didn't see any collection room. Passing through the living room, Xiaoxian brought Shintu Tianyin and Charlotte to a study. Before entering the door, Charlotte had already seen the situation in the study. There was a desk, a bookshelf, and a sofa. There was also a tea table made of precious red sandalwood. It looked like an ordinary study, but when Charlotte saw the surveillance cameras on both sides of the bookshelves, he didn't think it was an ordinary study anymore. And Xiaoxian stood in front of the study, entered the password, verified her fingerprint, and then opened the door. While he was doing these things, Charlotte had already taken off a button on his shirt and pulled out the mini receiver from his ear. These two items were tossed into a pot of green plants by the wall of the study. Not because of anything else, but because he had already seen a metal door hidden behind the bookshelf, and there was a detection device on the door. If he did not take off the electronic device on his body, the metal door would trigger the alarm. At that time, he would not see the sword of Attila, but a large group of armed bodyguards. And Xiaoxian entered the door and walked straight to the bookshelf. She grabbed a book and pulled it out. There was a series of clicking sounds, and the bookshelf slowly opened, revealing the metal door behind it. And Xiaoxian stood in front of the door, entered the password, verified her fingerprint, then stood in front of the roulette lock, turned the roulette and entered the password. During this process, Charlotte could see through everything. The two sets of passwords that Xiaoxian entered were all seen by him. It was funny that Xiaoxian deliberately blocked the keyboard to avoid being seen by Charlotte and Shintu Tianyin. Even when turning the roulette, she used her body to block the rotation of the roulette, not giving Shintu Tianyin and Charlotte any angle to pry. But he never dreamed that his every move was seen by Charlotte, who could see it more clearly than himself. The metal door slowly opened. It was a foot thick and the total weight was at least a ton. The space behind the metal door entered Charlotte's sight. It wasn't big, only about twice the size of an ordinary room, which was about 50 square meters. There were several display racks and incubators inside, and on the display racks were many antiques, all of which looked very old. In the middle was a wooden platform, and on it was a wooden frame. The wooden frame was covered with a set of ancient armor, typical of the Qing dynasty's military style. Under the wooden frame was a saber and a sword, both of which looked very old. Charlotte's gaze immediately fell on the ancient sword under the wooden frame. It was the sword of Attila, exactly the same as the ancient sword in the photo provided by his father. Tianyin, please come in. And Xiaoxian said, this place is really special, I also want to go in and take a look. Shintu Tianyin said. In fact, only Charlotte could see things that were so far away. She could only see things that were relatively large, and it wasn't clear. Charlotte also walked into the collection room. Beep beep beep, beep beep beep. A series of alarms suddenly sounded. Charlotte's heart suddenly tightened and he secretly cursed, could it be that I haven't taken anything off my body and it triggered the alarm? If it aroused Xiaoxian's vigilance, that would be terrible. And Xiaoxian turned around and stared straight at Charlotte. What are you hiding on your body? Charlotte forced himself to calm down and spread out his hands. I don't know either. I'm sorry, it seems like Shintu Tianyin said apologetically, I have a signal transmitter on me. As she spoke, she took out a small electronic device from her pocket. This was given to me by Ming Mei. When I'm in danger, I only need to press a button to send out a distress signal, and my bodyguards will come to save me. Charlotte immediately breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, there was the sound of hurried footsteps outside the study, and then a man's voice in Korean sounded from the speaker in the collection room. Young master, is there a problem? No, it's just an accident. And Xiaoxian said. Charlotte was secretly surprised. From the sound of the alarm to the appearance of the bodyguards outside, only 15 seconds had passed. And Xiaoxian walked to Shintu Tianyin's side and said very gently, Tianyin, give it to me. I'll put it outside and you can take it back when you leave. Shintu Tianyin handed the signal transmitter to Xiaoxian, and Xiaoxian took it to the desk in the study and put it down. After leaving the detection range of the collection room, the transmitter no longer triggered the alarm, and the alarm disappeared. Shintu Tianyin said, Xiaoxian, the security level of your family's collection room is comparable to the security level of a bank's vault. It can be seen that the things here must be very precious, right? Of course. And Xiaoxian said, in addition to the ancestral things, well, forget it, I'll take you to see my ancestors' armor and saber. If Charlotte wasn't here, and Xiuxian might have finished what she wanted to say. Charlotte was also here, so he wouldn't say it. In fact, if it weren't for Charlotte showing off Xiahou Dun's sword, he wouldn't have brought Shintu Tianyin here. Perhaps in the future, but at least not now. Men were creatures who cared about their pride the most, especially when it came to wooing women. That was what Charlotte was taking advantage of. His goal was only the sword of Attila, and he didn't care about anything else. In fact, he could already leave now, because he already knew the location of the family's collection room and the password to enter. Now, he only needed An Xiuxian's fingerprint to initiate the next step. However, Charlotte still chose to stay. Since An Xiuxian was putting in so much effort to show off in front of him, he had to cooperate, right? And Xiuxian led Shintu Tianyin straight to the armor at the end of the collection room. Charlotte followed behind them, his gaze slowly sweeping across the display shelves and incubators on both sides. He discovered that the display shelves were mostly filled with bronze, jade, and porcelain artifacts. Most of them were from China, not Korea. The incubators were filled with imperial edicts, ancient books, bamboo slips, and the like. They were all very precious. Just these antiques alone are probably worth $1 billion. The Yin family is really powerful, probably even more powerful than the Gu family. Charlotte thought to himself. Not bad. Shintu Tianyin finally saw the armor on the wooden shelf and praised sincerely, "It's so well preserved. It looks like it can still be worn on the battlefield. Xiuxian, I think you'll look very valiant in it." Hee. And Xiuxian laughed, looking very happy. He had put in so much effort, and it was worth it to receive Shintu Tianyin's praise. Charlotte's gaze fell on the sword of Attila on the weapon shelf. The sword was simple and unadorned, and there were even a few obvious nicks on the blade. However, the hilt was inlaid with a green gem. It was the only thing that added a bit of nobility to the ancient sword. Apart from that, there was nothing special about it. If it wasn't for the picture and the Xiongnu words for Attila on the blade, almost no one would think that it was the king's sword used by the Xiongnu king to exercise his power of slaughter. After confirming that the ancient sword was the sword of Attila, Charlotte's heart calmed down, and he began to think about his next step. At this moment, An Xiuxian picked up the saber used by her ancestor and gestured a few times. Then, she used the back of the saber to knock on Charlotte's shoulder and said provocatively, "Mr. Xia, this is a real antique. How does it compare to the treasured sword used by your ancestor, Xiahou Dun?" Charlotte smiled awkwardly. "Not bad, it looks very sharp." A disdainful smile appeared on An Xiuxian's lips. "Mr. Xia, I remember you saying that the treasured sword of your ancestor, Xiahou Dun, was so bright that it could even reflect a person's shadow. Do you think that sword is real?" Charlotte reached out and used 2 fingers to clamp the blade of the saber, then took it down from his shoulder and said calmly, "Before I saw your ancestor's saber, I believed that my ancestral treasured sword was real. After seeing it, I realized it's fake. Ha ha ha, I never believed that your family would have any treasured sword from the 3 Kingdoms period. Mr. Xia, you better change your habit of bragging, it's not a good habit." And Xiuxian continued to criticize Charlotte. He wanted to say that Charlotte was worthless in front of Shintu Tianyin. If it was any other time, Charlotte would have already retorted, but this time, he was very modest. Yes, I should change this habit. I've seen the saber and the armor. Tianyin, let's go. I still want to see something else, Shintu Tianyin said. Charlotte's performance today made her very disappointed. Charlotte shrugged his shoulders. "All right, I want to take my leave. Goodbye." And Xiuxian's face was full of smiles. He had won this confrontation. Chapter 319. Walking out of the study, Charlotte brushed past the green plants by the wall. He gently brushed his right hand, and it looked like he was caressing the green plant. However, when he retracted his hand, The spy device he had hidden in the green plant had returned to his hand. This was also the reason why he had to leave early. He had to retrieve the device hidden in the green plant. There were a few stern-looking bodyguards standing in the living room. When Charlotte appeared, their gazes were focused on Charlotte. Charlotte greeted them with a smile. "Hello?" No one paid attention to him. The bodyguards just looked at him coldly. Charlotte did not mind. He walked out of the door of the comfort house and headed back to his residence. The moment Charlotte stepped out of the door, a bodyguard in the living room asked, "Who's that idiot?" "I think he's the attendant of that China female CEO. I heard that our young master hates him," another bodyguard said. "He's just an idiot. I can beat him up for young master anytime," someone said. Charlotte repeatedly pretended to be an idiot. Even the family's bodyguards looked down on him. On the way, Charlotte said to the button, "I've already confirmed the location of that thing. It won't be difficult to get in, but it'll be a little troublesome to get that kid's fingerprint." Tang Buchuan's voice came through the mini earpiece. "And Jin Jian will hold a dinner party and discuss the groundbreaking ceremony with Shintu Tianin. Shintu Tianin will probably leave Korea after the groundbreaking ceremony. We have to take action tonight. Find a way to get close to Xiaoxian and get his fingerprint." He scanned all 5 fingers on his right hand, not just one, Charlotte reminded him. "Then get the fingerprints on Xiaoxian's right hand." Tang Buchuan's voice was heard. "Find a way to get out. I'll give you what you need." Charlotte smiled bitterly. "Okay, I'll come out now." A few minutes later, Charlotte arrived at the door. The guard did not stop him, but he took the initiative to talk to him. "Excuse me, is there a supermarket nearby? I want to buy some chewing gum." The guard shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. Charlotte shrugged and went out. The guard said in disdain, "Idiot from China. The Chinese language evolved from Korean, and he doesn't even know how to speak Korean. An idiot is an idiot." Xia Lei actually heard this sentence, and his back turned numb for a moment. However, he did not react and continued walking. A motorcycle came from the opposite direction. It wasn't moving very fast. The rider on the motorcycle was wearing a helmet. His entire head was covered, but Charlotte still saw the face hidden under the helmet. It was Qin Xiang. Qin Xiang held a black plastic bag in his hand as he drove toward Charlotte. The two met in the blink of an eye, and he quickly placed the plastic bag in his hand into Charlotte's hand. Both of them were godly thieves, and their hands were extremely fast. Even if someone stood beside them, they would not be able to see their movements clearly. The motorcycle brushed past them and continued to move forward. Charlotte also put the plastic bag into the inner pocket of his suit, walked a few meters forward, and then turned back. "Forget it, I'm not going to buy chewing gum. There's no supermarket nearby." Charlotte muttered to the guard, "Isn't Korea very developed? Why doesn't this place even have a supermarket? Is this considered a rural place?" The guard shook his head, indicating that he did not understand. After Charlotte entered the door, he said, "Idiot." Back in the room, Charlotte opened the black plastic bag. There were 2 bottles of special glue inside, one red and one blue. There was also a note with a paragraph written on it. The red one can make a copy of the target's fingerprint, and the blue one can stabilize the fingerprint. Remember, the red glue can only last for 10 minutes. After the fingerprint is made, you need to stabilize the fingerprint within 9 minutes, and then you have an hour to act. After reading the note, Charlotte burned it. He sprayed the red liquid on the palm of his right hand. It felt as if he had just washed his hand, without the sticky feeling of the glue. He could not see anything with the naked eye. Will this glue work? I have to find someone to try it on. Otherwise, it will be terrible if I make a mistake. Charlotte thought to himself. What he was worried about was not the effect of the fingerprint medicine, but that it would be discovered by Xiaoxian. Charlotte left the room, went to the door of Fu Mingmei's room next door, and knocked on the door with his left hand. "Who is it?" Fu Mingmei's voice came from the room, and she did not immediately open the door. Charlotte's left eye twitched slightly, and the door disappeared from his sight. In the room, Fu Mingmei was wearing a red lace dress on the bed, and she was not wearing any clothes yet. Her posture of bending her waist and legs allowed him to see her body. Her hair was still wet, and it was obvious that she had just come out of the shower. Charlotte also ended his X-ray vision, and an awkward smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, but he found an excuse for himself. She took a long time to shower. Fu Mingmei put on her clothes very quickly, and it took less than 5 minutes to finish. She opened the door and saw Charlotte standing at the door. "What's the matter? Well, why is your face so red?" "It's nothing, I just wanted to test your reaction," Charlotte said. "What did you say?" Fu Mingmei looked at Charlotte with some confusion. Charlotte suddenly slapped her face. Fu Mingmei instinctively raised her hand to block Charlotte's palm, but Charlotte did not hit her face. His right hand suddenly changed direction and grabbed her palm. Charlotte held her palm half lightly, then let go and said with a smile, "Your reaction is very fast. It's okay, you can do your thing." With that, he turned around and left. Fu Mingmei was stunned for a long time, and it was not until Charlotte returned to his room that she said, "Pervert, touching my hand in this way, I will cut off your hand next time." In the room, Charlotte had already sprayed blue glue on the palm of his right hand. When the two kinds of glue were mixed, there was a chemical reaction. He clearly saw the fingerprint on his right palm change rapidly, including the lines on the palm. It was very magical. In fact, this was not changing his fingerprint, but solidifying the fingerprint of Fu Mingmei that he had copied. Fu Mingmei is also an experienced professional bodyguard. Her vigilance should be much higher than in Xiuxian's. She did not notice that I was stealing her fingerprint, so in Xiuxian should not be aware of it. The test results made Charlotte very satisfied, and also made him relax a lot. The following time, Charlotte was preparing for the evening's action. Charlotte did not receive any invitation to attend the dinner party. He was completely regarded as an insignificant attendant. But this was not difficult for him. Before the dinner party began, he found the residence that in Xiuxian had specially arranged for Shintu Tianin. He did not care about the dinner party, but he knew that as long as he stayed with Shintu Tianin, and Xiuxian would not appear. When Charlotte came, Shintu Tianin had already put on his makeup and changed into a black evening dress, paired with a pair of silver high heels. It was the same cold and elegant style. "Lei, what's the matter with you today?" Shintu Tianin looked at Charlotte with a hint of displeasure. "What's the matter with me?" Charlotte did not know what she was referring to. Shintu Tianin slightly raised the corner of her mouth. "You were humble to in Xiuxian, and you even said something about Xiahou Dun's sword. I don't understand why you did that. You should be a very proud person. You are not worse than in Xiuxian. Why did you put your posture so low? You let me." Charlotte suddenly understood what she meant, and his heart suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. "Do you mean that I am not as good as him, making you lose face?" As if feeling the displeasure in Charlotte's heart, Shintu Tianin also explained. "No, I didn't mean that, I mean—" Charlotte interrupted her. "It's okay, you don't have to explain. I believe you didn't mean that. Maybe I was too polite." Such a thing did not need to be explained. The more it was explained, the more awkward it would be. Shintu Tianin looked at Charlotte, wanting to say something but could not say it. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became awkward. She liked Charlotte, she was very clear about this, but people change, especially when faced with too many choices. In the darkest and most difficult period of her life, Charlotte appeared like a black knight riding a tall horse, charging and breaking through enemy lines for her, protecting her safety. At that time, he was her hero, her Prince Charming. But now, this feeling was slowly fading, and today, Charlotte's performance was really terrible. People were like this. When they had no choice and were hungry, they could even gnaw on the bark of a tree. But facing a table full of delicacies every day, no matter how good the dishes were, would people still gnaw on the bark of a tree? Charlotte's heart also had his own thoughts. He smiled bitterly in his heart and said, Fu Mingmei said that she would give her pursuers a score. With my performance today, she will probably give me a lower score, right? However, he did not care. After experiencing Liang Xiao's betrayal, he would no longer easily give his feelings. As for him, he was also faced with too many choices. They were both outstanding people with strong personalities. How could it be easy for them to walk together and live to a ripe old age together? Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door, followed by An Xiuxian's voice. Tianyin, are you done? Can I come in? Charlotte smiled and said, Mr. N is really a very gentlemanly and polite person. Shintu Tianyin said calmly, Can you help me open the door? Okay. Charlotte seemed to have returned to his humble state, as he turned around to open the door for An Xiuxian. Shintu Tianyin frowned. She also had a question in her heart. Is he doing this on purpose? Charlotte walked towards the door. When his back was facing Shintu Tianyin, he quickly took out a small red bottle and touched it against the palm of his right hand a few times. When he walked to the door, he opened it with his left hand. And Xiuxian, who was in a suit, suddenly saw that the person who opened the door was Charlotte, and the smile on his face immediately disappeared. This guy is really haunting me. Hello, Mr. N. Charlotte extended his hand to An Xiuxian, wanting to shake hands with him. Why are you here? An Xiuxian said impatiently. He had no intention of shaking hands with Charlotte. Charlotte withdrew his hand awkwardly. I have nothing to do, so I came over to take a look. I heard that there is a banquet tonight, right? An Xiuxian sneered. Why? Didn't you receive an invitation? Chapter 320. It was a taunt. Charlotte smiled. I really didn't receive an invitation. I don't know, and Xiuxian spread her hands. Choi Minghu is in charge of this matter. I will help you ask. The people who are attending tonight's banquet are all reputable people in the Republic of Korea. If your identity is qualified, I think you will receive an invitation. Charlotte just smiled and said nothing. Shintu Tianyin sighed secretly. If Charlotte's performance was bad before, then Charlotte's performance at this time could only be described as terrible. The man that Shintu Tianyin wanted was definitely not a man who would lower his voice to others and deliberately curry favor with others. He was definitely not a man who could be ridiculed at will. And Xiuxian was no longer interested in talking to Charlotte. He walked over to Shintu Tianyin with an elegant and gentle smile on his face. Tianyin, you are so beautiful tonight. You will definitely be the most dazzling pearl at tonight's banquet. Shintu Tianyin stood up from the dressing table with a sweet smile on her face. Thank you. Shintu Tianyin's smile made An Xiuxian even happier. It was not only because Shintu Tianyin was smiling at him, but there was also an even more important reason. He had insulted Xia Lei to the point that he was like a mangy dog. However, Xia Lei could do nothing about it. Let's go. The banquet is about to start. And Xiuxian made an inviting gesture, feeling very gentlemanly. All right. Shintu Tianyin responded, but her gaze shifted to Charlotte. She was a little hesitant about whether she should ask Charlotte to come along. At this moment Charlotte walked over. Tianyin, there's something on your face. As he spoke, he did not wait for Shintu Tianyin to react. His right hand touched Shintu Tianyin's cheek. Charlotte's movement was not fast, and he seemed to be hesitant. Shintu Tianyin did not respond, but it did not mean that An Xiuxian did not respond. Just when Charlotte's right hand was about to touch Shintu Tianyin's cheek, he suddenly reached out to grab Charlotte's hand and said, What are you doing? Charlotte's hand suddenly adjusted its direction and held An Xiuxian's palm. I'm sorry, I saw wrongly. You go, I'm going back to my room to rest. With that, he turned and left. Throughout the whole process, Even Xiaoxian herself felt that she had grabbed Charlotte's hand in time and stopped Charlotte's impolite behavior. Not to mention Shintu Tianyin. She couldn't see any clues at all. Lei, come with us. Shintu Tianyin finally changed his mind when Xia Lei walked to the door. She was the one who invited Charlotte to South Korea. If he did not even have the qualification to attend the dinner, her heart would feel sorry. And Xiaoxian certainly did not want to, but he could not refuse Shintu Tianyin's wish, and his response was full of wisdom. Mr. Xia, didn't you hear? Tianyin's invitation is equal to my invitation. You can attend the dinner. You speak as if I, your father, have never eaten or drunk in 8 lifetimes. Charlotte cursed in his heart, but his face was full of kindness. Well, thank you. I'll borrow the bathroom. Charlotte turned back and quickly entered the bathroom in the room. And Xiaoxian sneered, vulgar. Shintu Tianyin's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. She felt that inviting Charlotte to attend the dinner seemed to be a mistake. Tianyin, let's go, Mr. Xia will come. And Xiaoxian said. Well, let's go. Shintu Tianyin and Xiaoxian left the room. In the bathroom, Charlotte quickly took out the blue bottle and sprayed it on the palm of his right hand. When the two liquids were mixed, the fingerprints and palm lines on his hand quickly changed into Xiaoxian's fingerprints and palm lines. Then he looked at the watch on his hand. He only had 1 hour to steal the sword of Attila. I've got the thing, let's start, Charlotte said to a button on his clothes. The miniature receiver implanted in his ear transmitted Long Bing's voice. Start. Ending the call, Charlotte walked out of the bathroom. Shintu Tianyin and Xiaoxian were no longer in the room. He actually knew when Xiaoxian and Shintu Tianyin left, but looking at the empty room, his heart still emerged a trace of sadness. Have I become a hateful person? Charlotte laughed at himself, then left the room. The dinner was held in the restaurant of an e-house. The restaurant was very big, but there weren't many guests present, but they were all famous people in Korea's political and business circles. When Charlotte walked into the restaurant, he just happened to see Shintu Tianyin and a few Korean people exchanging greetings, with Xiaoxian acting as her translator. One was like a jade tree in the wind, the other was cold and elegant. The feeling of the two together was really a perfect match. A waiter walked in front of Charlotte with a tray of wine, and said in a low voice, "Where's the thing?" Only then did Charlotte see clearly. The waiter was actually Qin Xiang. He had a mustache on his lips, and his face had also been meticulously handled, to the point that he didn't recognize him at first glance. But then again, who would have thought that Qin Xiang, whose face was cleaner and smoother than a woman's, would have a mustache? Charlotte calmly picked up a glass of red wine from the wine tray, and said in a low voice, "In Jinjian's study, but don't act rashly, we have to go together. We still have 50 minutes. Qin Xiang reminded. "I know, you wait for me in that corridor first," Charlotte said. Qin Xiang nodded, turned around, and left. Charlotte noticed that he was wearing a hotel's uniform, and the waiters in the restaurant were also wearing the same uniform. This was the reason why Qin Xiang was able to sneak in. No matter who held such a high-class banquet, their own chef would definitely not be able to do it, and there wouldn't be enough waiters, so they would usually outsource it. If Qin Xiang sneaked in, then did Long Bing and Tang Buchuan also sneak in? This thought popped up in Charlotte's mind, and his eyes quickly swept across the entire restaurant, and then he saw Tang Buchuan. Tang Buchuan was holding a Korean beauty's arm, talking and laughing, looking elegant and at ease. He also had some makeup on his face, but it wasn't very obvious. Charlotte suddenly remembered what Tang Yuyan had said to him. She said that Tang Buchuan was very popular in South Asia, Korea, and Japan, and that he was mainly in charge of missions in these regions in Innings 101. Seeing Tang Buchuan's relaxed attitude at this moment, it gave people the feeling that this was his home ground. Charlotte didn't see Long Bing, but he could guess that she was in charge of the support and retreat. All the personnel were already in position, and they were just waiting for him to open the safety door and take away the sword of Attila. Charlotte put down his wine glass and walked to the entrance of the restaurant. "Mr. Xia!" And Xiuxian suddenly called out. Charlotte suddenly had a headache, but he turned around with a smile on his face. "What's the matter, Mr. N? Do you know how to play with a sword?" And Xiuxian came over with a look of contempt in her eyes. "Play with a sword?" Charlotte shook his head. "No." And Xiuxian said, "Mr. Xia, don't be modest. I heard that you know Kung Fu. If you know Kung Fu, why don't you know how to play with a sword? Are you afraid of losing?" Charlotte said, "I really don't know. I'm sorry, I can't play with you." "So you're really worried about losing? Haha, aren't you too timid?" And Xiuxian took the opportunity to make sarcastic remarks about Charlotte. With Charlotte's skills, not to mention 1 in Xiuxian, even 5 in Xiuxian would be no match for him. But he only had less than 50 minutes, and he couldn't waste it here. Therefore, even if in Xiuxian repeatedly provoked and ridiculed him, he couldn't respond. At this time, Shintu Tianyin came over and whispered to Charlotte, "Why do you have stage fright? In South Korea, fencing is a kind of ghost sport, and also an opportunity to show one's personal style. I want to see you beat him." She also came to make trouble, which made Charlotte's head hurt. Many guests looked over and whispered to each other. Some people were guessing the identity of Charlotte, some people were guessing whether there was any conflict between Xiuxian and Charlotte, and some people were guessing the role played by Shintu Tianyin between the two men. When Charlotte was looking for an excuse to refuse, Tang Buchuan's voice suddenly came from the micro-receiver in his ear. "If you leave at this time, it will arouse suspicion. If you agree to him and then you are defeated by him, you will have a reason to leave." As a tactical planner, Tang Buchuan also maintained absolute calmness on this occasion. There was not much time left, but he could still keep his composure. Tang Buchuan's reminder also made Charlotte's eyes light up. He smiled and said, "All right, let's play a little." And Xiuxian also smiled and said, "I'll get someone to bring protective gear." Charlotte said, "No need for protective gear, just 2 swords will do." And Xiuxian laughed coldly and said, "I am the fencing champion of the last World Championships. If you don't use protective gear, you will get injured. You don't have to worry about that. Just bring the swords." Charlotte looked very confident, and Xiuxian's bodyguard very quickly brought 2 heavy swords used for fencing. He gave one to Xiuxian and the other to Charlotte. These 2 heavy swords were made of steel, but the tip of the sword was blunt. It could hurt people, but it would not be fatal. The guests also took the initiative to open up an empty space for the 2 to duel. And Jin Jian laughed and said in a rather magnanimous manner, "Our family's ancestor was a general. It seems that warrior's blood also flows in Sukshin's body. Sukshin, that gentleman, is a guest. Be careful and don't injure the guest." "I know," and Xiuxian said in a very graceful manner. Shintu Tianyin moved closer to Charlotte's ear and said in a low voice, "Defeat him for me." Charlotte was stunned for a moment, and then he softly said, He smiled bitterly in his heart. He understood that she wanted to see him display his elegance and knock down the insufferably arrogant Xiuxian. But before the duel had even begun, he was destined to lose. He could not give her what she wanted. "Mr. Xia, are you a left-handed swordsman?" And Xiuxian noticed that Charlotte held his sword with his left hand. Charlotte said indifferently, "Are the Korean swordsmen the most powerful thing about their mouths?" "Humph!" And Xiuxian coldly snorted and suddenly strode toward Charlotte, thrusting his sword out. And Xiuxian's speed was very fast, and his movements were also very elegant and nimble. But in Charlotte's eyes, he was as slow as the tortoise in the hare and the tortoise race. From the moment Xiuxian showed signs of preparing his sword to thrusting out with the heavy sword in his hand, all of Xiuxian's body's reactions fell into his eyes. If Charlotte wanted to stab Xiuxian at this moment, he would only need to move his hand, and his speed would definitely be twice Enchantment's. But he did not do that. He raised his hand to block, cutting a sorry figure as he blocked Enchantment's attack. Chapter 321. Ding ding ding. The speed of Enchantment's attack was getting faster and faster, and the strength of his stab was getting heavier and heavier. With his speed and strength, even if he was using a blunt sword, he would be seriously injured as long as he was stabbed. However, no matter how fast Enchantment was, how fierce, Charlotte could always block or avoid it in time. Although Enchantment's offensive was like a tide, Charlotte was like the Three Gorges Dam. His defense was watertight. "What are you doing?" Tang Buchuan's voice sounded in the mini receiver. "We don't have time." Getting injured and leaving, this was Tang Buchuan's plan, and it was definitely a very good plan. However, Enchantment was so fierce, if Charlotte let go of his defense and was stabbed by his sword, he would definitely be seriously injured. If he bled, or his ribs were broken, it would inevitably affect his later actions. He was now riding a tiger and unable to get off. What to do? On Enchantment's side, the more he fought, the more frightened he became. He was the champion of the South Korean amateur fencing competition. Although there was a certain gap between him and the professional champion, he was also very powerful. But he had already attacked more than 20 times, but he didn't even touch the corner of Charlotte's clothes. But in the eyes of the onlookers, it was a different situation. In their eyes, Charlotte was completely suppressed by Enchantment, and he would be stabbed to the ground by Enchantment's sword at any time. Some guests began to applaud, and some guests cheered for Enchantment. Shintu Tianyin also became more and more anxious. She couldn't help but shout, "Lei, what are you doing? Fight back! Why don't you fight back?" Shintu Tianyin's voice seemed to give Charlotte a shot of stimulant. He suddenly took a big step forward and stabbed Enchantment with his sword. Hiss! There was a cracking sound. Charlotte's crotch split open. Enchantment blocked Charlotte's heavy sword and laughed. "Mr. Xia, are you a comedian? How can you perform comedy on such an occasion? But I have to admit, this is too funny." The onlookers also laughed. There was no smile on Shintu Tianyin's face, only disappointment. He wanted to see Charlotte defeat the insufferably arrogant Enchantment and show off his elegance, but he actually burst his crotch in this kind of situation. Charlotte sheathed his heavy sword. "I'm going to change my pants. Wait for me, I will defeat you." "All right, I'll wait for you." Enchantment said disdainfully, "You better change into a sturdy pair of pants. If we fight again, I won't go easy on you." In other words, he had held back just now. Charlotte did not mind. He tossed the heavy sword in his hand to Enchantment, turned around, and left the restaurant. Shintu Tianyin watched as Charlotte left, his eyes filled with disappointment. Although she was deeply disappointed with Charlotte's performance, there was a trace of sadness in her heart when she saw Charlotte leave in disgrace. Some pictures uncontrollably emerged in her mind. Charlotte fought against 10 people at the Great Ensemble and chopped Gu Kawu's bodyguards. Charlotte and she subdued the assassin on the island with their bare hands and lay together in the morgue. Charlotte treated her father with acupuncture, which made her father, who had lost hope, become a healthy person. Am I asking too much of him? Too much? Those scenes of the past appeared in his mind like a movie, and Shintu Tianyin couldn't help but ask such a question in his heart. Enchantment walked to Shintu Tianyin's side and said with a smile, "Tianyin, Mr. Xia is your friend. Because of this, I have already been lenient, but I didn't expect him. Sigh, I don't even know how to describe him. Perhaps he really is a comedian." Shintu Tianyin wanted to say something for Charlotte, but those words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say them no matter how hard he tried. At the same time, Charlotte had already appeared in the corridor leading to Enjinjian's study. There was originally a bodyguard in the corridor, but at this time, he was no longer in sight. When Charlotte appeared in the corridor, Qin Xiang happened to come out of a room. Charlotte's left eye moved slightly, and he saw the bodyguard lying behind the door. What happened to your pants? Did you kill him? The two of them asked different questions at the same time. Charlotte smiled bitterly. Let's not talk about my pants. Let's begin. I just gave him an anesthetic needle, Qin Xiang said. The two of them came to the door of the study. Charlotte quickly entered the password on the keyboard, and then placed his right palm on the fingerprint scanner. Click, the door of the study opened. Charlotte reached out to push the door of the study, but his hand stopped in the air. He thought that there was a surveillance camera installed on the wall behind the bookshelf. If he went in like this, he and Qin Xiang would be captured by that surveillance camera. Although there was no one here, it didn't mean that there was no one guarding the surveillance terminal. There is a surveillance camera facing the door. It's a bit troublesome, Charlotte said with a frown. Don't worry, Long Bing has taken care of it. Qin Xiang said, it's that person called Kujia. He hacked into the Yin family's surveillance system. The surveillance terminal's image is constantly repeating, and he can't see us at all. Are you sure? I'm sure. It wasn't Qin Xiang who said this, but Long Bing's voice that came from the receiver in his ear. Charlotte didn't hesitate. He reached out to push the door open and entered the study with Qin Xiang. After entering the study, Charlotte buttoned a button on his shirt and took out the mini receiver in his ear. There's an alarm device? Qin Xiang was an expert in this area. Although Charlotte didn't say anything, he could guess the reason why Charlotte did this. Charlotte nodded. Take yours off too. Put it by the door. If you get close to the bookshelf, the alarm will be triggered. Qin Xiang did the same. Charlotte walked under the bookshelf and pulled the book that Enchantment had pulled. The bookshelf moved away and revealed the metal door. Qin Xiang pursed her lips. Germany's Novafen security door. And Jinjian is really willing to spend money. Just this door costs millions, and I can't open it myself. Fingerprints alone aren't enough. Lei, can you do it? Charlotte didn't say anything. He stood in front of the door, entered the password, scanned his fingerprint, and turned the roulette lock to enter the password. Click, click, click. The security door opened, and the space inside was immediately revealed. Charlotte walked in quickly. He didn't even bother to look at the other antique. He walked directly to the wooden shelf and picked up the sword of Attila. It was heavy in his hand. It felt like it weighed more than 15 kilograms. This weight surprised him. Judging from the size and material of the sword of Attila, its normal weight should be more than 10 kilograms. However, its actual weight was more than twice that. Is it not made of iron? Although Charlotte was curious, he knew very well that this wasn't the time to study the sword of Attila. He turned to leave, but he saw Qin Xiang rolling up an ancient painting and holding an ancient book under her arm. Xia Lei wanted to stop him, but he swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue. Qin Xiang had taken a huge risk to help him. He was a godly thief, so why couldn't he make some money along the way? Anyway, stealing a sword was stealing a painting and an ancient book was also stealing. That. Qin Xiang looked at Charlotte eagerly. You don't mind making a small fortune, right? Charlotte smiled. Take it if you want. Why would I mind? Don't worry, I won't tell Long Bing and Tang Buchuan. Forget about me, but you're taking such a big risk. You should at least get something in return. Take it, take more. These things belong to Jinjian anyway. It would be a waste not to take them. As soon as Charlotte spoke, Qin Xiang took a few more things in just a few seconds. As if by magic, he took out a black cloth bag and put all the things into it. The two of them left the study. Charlotte handed the sword of Attila to Qin Xiang to take away while he walked towards his room. He needed to change into a new pair of pants before returning to the dining room to continue his fencing duel with Enchantment. Tang Buchuan's plan was to let him get injured during the fencing duel and then leave. However, if Jinjian and Enchantment found out that the things were missing, they might suspect him. It would be more reasonable for him to break open the crotch and go back to change into a new pair of pants. Therefore, compared to Tang Buchuan's plan, his plan was more reasonable and flawless. Just as he walked out of the corridor, Tang Buchuan's voice came through the mini receiver. "Is it done?" "It's done," Charlotte said. "I've already prepared a pair of pants for you. They're in the washroom on the first floor," Tang Buchuan said. Charlotte's lips curled into a smile. "Okay, I'll go and change right away." Tang Buchuan had even prepared a pair of pants. This was even better. He didn't even need to go back to his room to change. His plan was even more perfect. Entering the washroom on the first floor, Charlotte immediately saw Tang Buchuan smoking in the washroom. There was a plastic bag on the sink beside him, and inside the plastic bag was a pair of pants. As for him, he was only wearing a pair of briefs. This was his so-called pants. Charlotte was speechless. "Quickly take off your pants." "I'll put them on," Tang Buchuan said. "I'll leave first." "You can't leave, or else you'll be suspected. You stay, so you can observe the situation and act according to the situation," Charlotte said as he took off his pants. "I've already given the things to Qin Xiang to bring out. You guys have to hurry back to the country. Also, you have to prepare a plan to help me return to the country, just in case." Tang Buchuan flicked the cigarette butt in his hand. "Don't worry, I'll be ready. I have a plan to deal with all emergencies." Charlotte didn't say anything more. He put on Tang Buchuan's pants and left the washroom. Tang Buchuan's figure was similar to his. The color of his pants was also black, and the style was also a suit, so no one could tell that it was Tang Buchuan's pants. When Charlotte walked into the dinner restaurant, the guests' eyes were focused on him. Some people whispered and didn't hide their disdain in their hearts. "Look, that China comedian is here again. He's really thick-skinned. If I were him, I would never come back. It would be shameful to come back. Are China people very thick-skinned?" Of course. Otherwise, why would they say that the Dragon Boat Festival is theirs? Haha, that's true. Although Shintu Tianyin couldn't understand those Korean discussions, she could see from their faces that they were mocking Charlotte. She really had enough. She walked over to Charlotte and said, "Lei, let's get out of here." Without waiting for Charlotte to speak, and Xiaoxian came over, holding two heavy swords in her hands. "Mr. Xia, you really have the courage to come back. I just bet with my friends that you wouldn't dare to come back, but you came back. Well, we should determine the winner. Let's get started." Xia Lei smiled faintly. "All right, it's about time we decide the winner." "You?" Shintu Tianyin sighed. "Don't you understand what's going on?" What she wanted to say was, "Can't you see that he's teasing you?" But she couldn't say such words. Charlotte smiled disapprovingly. "Don't worry, when do I not know what to do?" Shintu Tianyin suddenly froze for a moment. She had heard these words before. At this moment, she seemed to feel that the Charlotte she was familiar with was back. His eyes, his smile, his imposing manner, were all like this. And Xiaoxian raised her hand and threw the heavy sword to Charlotte. Charlotte reached out and grabbed it. With a flick of his wrist, the heavy sword trembled and pointed straight at Xiaoxian. This time, Charlotte still held the sword with his left hand. Chapter 322. Not bad, but it's useless. And Xiaoxian stabbed at Charlotte with her sword. Charlotte blocked Xiaoxian's sword, and the two swords collided in the air, making a crisp sound. But before Xiaoxian could retract his sword, Charlotte suddenly flicked his wrist, and the bar-shaped sword suddenly bent and slapped Xiaoxian's face. This crisp sound stupefied Xiaoxian, as well as everyone else. The rules of fencing were thrusts, slashes, and whips were not scored, but a red mark on Xiaoxian's face was more convincing than 100 points. If they were fighting with real swords and knives, Xiaoxian's face would probably be half gone. "Sorry, I was too nervous and accidentally hit your face," Charlotte said apologetically. "Are you okay?" Sorry, I accidentally hit your face. This sentence was actually another slap on Xiuxian's face. In the duel a few minutes ago, he fiercely attacked Charlotte dozens of times, but he didn't even touch the corner of Charlotte's clothes. But Charlotte, who came back after changing his pants, only needed to hit him in the face with one blow. And Xiuxian's face was burning. Part of it was pain, but part of it was humiliation. Damn it! And Xiuxian roared in her heart. She took a step forward and thrust her sword at Xiaolei. Charlotte calmly responded and blocked with his sword. Ding ding ding, the two swords collided in the air, and the two men's positions were also fluctuating. The duel scene was tense and exciting. Come on! Shintu Tianyin clenched her fists nervously. She wanted to see Charlotte defeat Xiuxian, and this moment seemed to come at any time. She stared at Charlotte and didn't even dare to blink. In fact, if Charlotte wanted to end the duel, he could stab Xiuxian to the ground at any time. But he didn't intend to do that because he was suppressed by Xiuxian in the previous duel and looked very embarrassed. In the next duel, he defeated Xiuxian in 2 or 3 moves. Such a huge contrast would inevitably attract the attention of some people. Sooner or later, Jin Jian would discover that the sword of Attila had been stolen. It would be unwise to be suspected just because he won the duel beautifully. Therefore, he seemed to be very patient as he fought with Xiuxian, giving off a feeling that they were evenly matched. If he wanted to win, he had to win with difficulty. As a result, the duel between the two of them continued to play out like this. Xiuxian was about to stab Charlotte and win the duel, but at the critical moment Charlotte dodged. Sometimes, when Charlotte was about to stab Xiuxian, he would be blocked by Xiuxian at the crucial moment. Fencing was a competitive sport that required a high degree of physical and mental concentration. After a few minutes, Xiuxian's forehead was already covered in sweat. Although there were no beads of sweat on Charlotte's forehead, he was out of breath. "Defeat that China man!" A female guest among the guests shouted in Korean. Just as she finished speaking, Charlotte suddenly leaped forward and stabbed Xiuxian in the chest. Xiuxian, who was already exhausted, was stabbed and fell to the ground. Xiuxian wanted to get up, but Charlotte's sword flashed and landed on his neck. It was only a few centimeters away from stabbing his neck. The entire crowd was silent. No one believed that this duel would end like this. A China kid who was jokingly called a comedian had defeated a Korean fencing champion. Moreover, throughout the entire duel, Xiuxian did not even touch the corner of his opponent's clothes. Instead, he was slapped in the face. Charlotte put away his heavy sword and reached out to pull Xiuxian up. "Mr. N, thank you for letting me win." These words fell into Xiuxian's ears, but it was an embarrassing mockery. His face was extremely gloomy. The gentlemanly thing to do would have been to pull Charlotte's hand and get up. However, he could no longer maintain his gentlemanly demeanor. He brushed away Charlotte's hand and got up by himself. Charlotte shrugged and tossed the heavy sword to Xiuxian. Jin Jian's expression was also very ugly. The Koreans were a people who cared more about their face than the Chinese. Charlotte had humiliated his son in front of so many distinguished guests, which was equivalent to humiliating him as well. What he wanted to do the most was to chase Charlotte out, but the duel was provoked by Xiuxian. He could not find any reason to make things difficult for Charlotte. To the father and son, Charlotte was definitely a housefly. They could not hit him, so letting this housefly fly around their heads was a disgusting feeling. Shintu Tianyin walked to Charlotte's side with an uncontrollable smile on her face. She moved closer to Charlotte's ear and whispered, "I knew you were stronger than him." Charlotte smiled. It was a ticklish feeling to have her whispering in his ear. Shintu Tianyin and Charlotte looked very intimate, and the guests began to discuss again. "That China fellow is actually quite handsome. What does he do?" "That woman is the female chairman of the Wanxiang Group, a large financial conglomerate in China. That fellow is probably a gigolo she keeps." There's such a thing? If that's the case, I really feel bad for Enchantment. Why would he pursue such a woman? I also heard. It was a mess of discussions. The Korean's way of thinking was really strange and arrogant at times. Charlotte turned a deaf ear to them. He had already obtained the sword of Attila and regained his lost face. He was in a good mood and did not care about what these people were saying. What are they talking about? Tianin's intuition was very sharp. Those people were looking at her and Charlotte, and she could easily guess that they were talking about her and Charlotte. Charlotte smiled. Do you really want to know? You're so annoying. Tell me. Tianin urged. Charlotte lowered his voice. Those people say that I'm a gigolo you keep. Tianin was stunned for a moment, and then she blushed. These guys are really rude. Charlotte and Tianin were whispering to each other intimately, which made Enchantment's teeth itch. He felt a burning pain on his face. Not only the swollen side of his face that Charlotte had slapped, but his entire face was burning with pain. Just like his father, Enchantment, he also wanted to chase Charlotte out. However, when he thought about Tianin's possible reaction, he did not dare to do so. Let's start the banquet. Su Xiuzhen broke the awkward deadlock. The banquet was very sumptuous. Enchantment invited Tianin to the main table. This table was filled with important people from the political and business circles of Korea. Enchantment continued to act as Tianin's translator, introducing the distinguished guests to Tianin. The father and son intentionally gave Charlotte the cold shoulder, but Charlotte did not care. He casually found a table and sat down, enjoying the delicacies cooked by the chef, and waited for the banquet to end. When the banquet ended, just when Charlotte thought that Enchantment and Enchantment were going to send the guests off, Enchantment said, "Everyone here is my friend, and I treat you all like family. I would like to invite everyone to take a look at my collection. I would like everyone to see the armor and saber left behind by my family's ancestors." Some of the male guests cheered, looking very excited. However, Charlotte felt a headache coming on. To him, the best outcome would be for Enchantment to find out that he had lost his things when he returned to the country. At that time, even if he was suspected, the family would not be able to do anything to him. However, now that he was still in Korea, Enchantment found out that Attila's sword and some of his collections were missing. It was not a good thing for him. Tianin left the table and walked to Charlotte's side. We've already seen it. Why don't we go back? I want to talk to you. Why don't we go and take a look as well? I saw quite a few cultural relics that belong to our China, but I don't know how those things got here. Charlotte said. Okay, if you want to go, I'll go with you. Tianin said. Enchantment originally wanted to invite Tianin, but seeing that Tianin was chatting and laughing with Charlotte, he gave up on the idea. He did not want to talk to Charlotte, not even a word. Under Enchantment's lead, a large group of guests came to the door of his study. Enchantment went in first. He did not want anyone to see him inputting the secret technique and checking his fingerprints. A large group of guests stood at the door, waiting. Charlotte's expression was very calm, but his heart was not calm at all. He could not help but guess what Enchantment's reaction would be after discovering that the sword of Attila was stolen. He could not help but guess what Enchantment would do and how he would deal with it. This was also the reason why he came here. He wanted to pay attention to the development of the situation. This Enchantment probably wants to show off his taste and strength. Tianin's voice was very soft. Although I don't know how he got those cultural relics, we are still the hosts, right? Seeing the antiques and cultural relics that belong to our country is a really strange feeling. Charlotte smiled and said, "You didn't say that before." Tianin said, "How could I say that in front of Enchantment? After all, our two companies are still cooperating." The cooperation she was talking about was the Wanxiang Corporation and Divine Domain Corporation building an electronic production base in Korea, mainly producing cell phone accessories and car electronics. The Wanxiang Corporation started off by relying on real estate. After accumulating a large amount of capital, they had already started expanding into overseas markets. She was a very ambitious woman, and she would never be content with the status quo. Charlotte understood her ambition and ability very well, but he still felt a trace of worry for her. Although I'm not familiar with Enchantment, I can tell that he's not an honest person. There's also Enchantment. He's simply an old fox. If you're cooperating with a Korean like him, you have to be more cautious. Don't let him take advantage of you. A hint of a smile appeared on Shintutianin's lip. Charlotte was still so concerned about her. She felt a warm feeling in her heart, just like in the past. However, she did not think that Enchantment and Enchantment would lie to her. Moreover, she also had the ability to prevent such a thing from happening. Thus, she did not take Charlotte's warning to heart. Charlotte sighed softly in his heart and thought to himself, she still won't listen to my advice easily. Her personality is really too strong. In the study, Enchantment opened the metal door. He did not take a closer look at the situation inside. Following that, he turned around and opened the door to the study, inviting the guests outside to take a look inside. A large group of guests followed Enchantment and Enchantment into the collection room. The moment these guests entered, they could not help but let out gasps of admiration. Some of them even excitedly called out the origins of a certain cultural relic or antique, such as an imperial edict issued by a certain emperor to a certain minister, or a certain painting or calligraphy by a famous artist, or the value of a certain piece of blue and white porcelain, and so on. Hearing these praises, Enchantment could not help but reveal a smile on his face. However, this smile froze on his face a few seconds later. He suddenly saw that the collection he was most proud of, the sword of Attila, was no longer on the weapon rack that he was familiar with. Chapter 323. In Enchantment's collection room, the most precious item was not the armor and blade left behind by the family's ancestor, but the sword of Attila. One was an unknown minor general from a vassal state of the Qing dynasty, while the other was the famous Xiongnu king Attila. This was the difference. The sword of Attila, which symbolized Attila's power and glory, would probably become the hottest topic of discussion in the entire world if it were to be exhibited. However, the sword of Attila had disappeared. The guests still did not know what had happened. They were still praising the items in the collection room, trying their best to flatter Enchantment. Charlotte and Shintutianin were also chatting and laughing, discussing an imperial edict from the Qing dynasty emperor. However, this was just a pretense. He had been observing the changes in Enchantment's expression the whole time. What's going on? And Enchantment had also noticed that the sword of Attila had disappeared, and he immediately became nervous. I was the one who wanted to ask you. What's going on? Enchantment's voice was filled with anger, as if he would explode at any moment. I don't know, Enchantment turned to look at Charlotte and Shintutianin. He recalled that he had brought Charlotte and Shintutianin here to admire his ancestors' armor and blade, but he could not link Charlotte and Shintutianin to what was happening before his eyes. Enchantment finally exploded, his emotions a little out of control. Everyone, quiet down. Everyone, quiet down. The guests in the collection room immediately quietened down, and everyone's gazes gathered on Enchantment. Enchantment said in a deep voice, Please forgive me, but don't leave this place. The bodyguard who had accompanied Enchantment had already used his communication device to contact the other bodyguard. Those bodyguards very quickly rushed over and blocked the door of the study, not letting anyone leave. What's going on? Someone asked. Why don't we leave this place? Could there be some problem? Discussions broke out, and the originally quiet scene became lively again. A bodyguard walked in and whispered in Jinjian's ear, "Director N, the brother in charge of guarding the study has been knocked out. He's in another room." And Xiuxian also said, "Dad, apart from the sword of Attila, we also lost a few precious items." And Jinjian's brows were already tightly knitted together. "Did you lose something?" someone asked in surprise. "Does he suspect that we stole his things? That's funny. Aren't we all in the restaurant? Who does he think we are?" The guests discussed among themselves, and some were even dissatisfied. The guests who were able to attend this banquet were all people of status, and Jinjian's treasures were blocking them in this collection room, so they would definitely feel uncomfortable. Silence. And Jinjian said angrily, "Someone stole my sword of Attila, and that person might be among you. Before we find out who it is, no one is allowed to leave." "They really think we're thieves," someone said angrily. "Are you kidding me? Is he crazy? Who am I? It's too much to be questioned like this." The collection room was very noisy, and it was impossible to calm down. Charlotte had been observing in Jinjian and in Xiuxian's reactions without batting an eyelid. Although he looked calm on the surface, as if he was watching the show as if it was none of his business, he was actually very nervous in his heart. If he had left any clues behind during the operation just now and was coincidentally discovered, it would be terrible. Even if he was a godly thief, he couldn't help but feel guilty at this time. How could this be? Shintu Tianyin had a look of surprise on his face. This collection room isn't a place that anyone can casually enter. Who would have such great ability? Charlotte said, "I also find it strange. There's a password and fingerprint, and there's even someone guarding it. The person who can steal things from here must be a godly thief. I'm afraid that they've been watching for a long time." Godly thief? Are there really godly thieves in this world? Shintu Tianyin laughed. "I really want to see what that godly thief looks like. I think he's very good." Charlotte laughed in his heart and thought to himself, "Isn't he standing right in front of you?" And Xiuxian walked over. His gaze fell on Charlotte as he probed, "Mr. Xia, it's really strange. I brought you and Tianyin here to take a look, but our family's most precious collection disappeared. Tell me, what's going on?" Charlotte frowned. "Mr. N, what do you mean?" And Xiuxian said coldly, "I don't mean anything. I'm just asking. Everyone here is a suspect, and everyone needs to clear their names." What he meant was that he had to give him a reasonable explanation. Charlotte shrugged his shoulders. "What do you want me to clarify? Do I need to clarify anything? You have to understand that I didn't ask you to bring me to your collection room. If you didn't bring me here, I wouldn't have known that there was such a collection room in your house. What do you want me to clarify in such a situation?" And Xiuxian's face was gloomy, but he couldn't refute Charlotte's words. He subconsciously wanted to find some trouble for Charlotte, even framing him, but there was no flaw on Charlotte's body. Shintu Tianyin was somewhat unhappy. "Xiuxian, do you mean that I'm also a suspect? Do I also need to clarify anything to you?" "No, no, no." And Xiuxian then said, "I'm sorry, Tianyin. You know that I absolutely didn't mean that. I doubt myself, but I won't doubt you. If you want to leave, I'll send you away now. Let's go. I think we'd better go to a hotel." Shintu Tianyin said, "After such a thing happened, I don't want to live here anymore." Charlotte nodded. "Okay, let's go to a hotel." But Xiuxian stopped Charlotte. "He can't. Mr. Xia can't leave." Shintu Tianyin's brows suddenly wrinkled. "Xiuxian, Lei is my friend. Do you have to do this?" And Xiuxian said, "Tianyin, please understand. You see, the guests who came to the dinner this time are staying. They are all famous people in South Korea. If Mr. Xia also leaves, then they will also leave. If they all leave, we may let the thief go." "Well, I won't leave either." Shintu Tianyin was a little angry, and Xiuxian wanted to explain, but Charlotte said, Tianyin, you'd better go. Maybe they will search you later. I don't care, but who are you? You can't lose face. Search me? Shintu Tianyin was even angrier. Charlotte. And Xiuxian was also angry. What nonsense are you talking about? Who said I want to search Tianyin? You are a scoundrel. Charlotte sneered. He no longer spoke in Chinese, but in English, he said loudly. I'm a scoundrel? I think you're the scoundrel. Do you think we're all thieves? Everyone here is a famous person. Who do you think you are? The President of South Korea? You don't have the right to treat everyone as a suspect. Few of the guests present understood Chinese, but the majority understood English. After all, they were all elites in Seoul, and English was the international language. They were definitely more enthusiastic about learning English than Chinese. Charlotte's clamor in English immediately caused an uproar in the collection room. That's right. They were all famous people. Why were they asked to stay here for investigation? Since Charlotte came to South Korea, and Xiuxian had been finding trouble for Charlotte and causing trouble for Charlotte. Now, it was Charlotte's turn to find trouble for him and cause trouble for him. Even though Enchantment was the chairman of the Divine Domain Corporation and had a strong influence in the political world, offending so many famous people in one go was definitely not a good thing. Moreover, he was still counting on these people to support him in the next presidential election. And Enchantment's expression became increasingly gloomy. His eyes were like those of an experienced old wolf. However, Xiuxian was not as calm as Enchantment. He grabbed Charlotte's collar and said coldly, Charlotte, you will die a horrible death. Charlotte did not struggle. Instead, he said loudly in English, Are you threatening to kill me? I want to call the police. The guests' gazes all gathered on Xiuxian and Charlotte. They discussed all sorts of topics in private. Xiuxian, let go of him, Enchantment said. Everyone, I'm really sorry. I made the wrong decision in a moment of panic. How about this? Let's go to the living room and have a seat. I'll treat everyone to tea and express my apologies. Only then did the guests' resentment subside a little. Enchantment and Xiuxian brought the guests to the living room. Charlotte and Shintu Tianyin were among them. They did not stay in the living room for more than a few minutes before the police arrived. There was a large group of them. The police technicians pulled up the surveillance footage. Some of the police officers surveyed the scene, and some of the police officers investigated the guests. Charlotte was clearly given special treatment. A police officer questioned him in English. Charlotte responded calmly and cooperated with the investigation. He had guessed every question the police officer asked and had long since prepared the answers. After answering the police officer's questions, Charlotte's gaze shifted to Enchantment. From the moment Enchantment entered the living room, he had been on the phone. His expression was also very nervous, as if he was deeply worried. Charlotte's heart was filled with doubts. He thought to himself, it's just an ancient sword. Even if it's Attila's sword, it's just a product to Enchantment, a plaything. Even if Attila's sword is worth 200 million or 1 billion, it shouldn't be much to someone like Enchantment, right? But why is he so nervous? For some reason, Charlotte suddenly thought of Attila's sword's abnormal weight. Could it be that Attila's sword was still hiding some secret? Shintu Tianyin walked to Charlotte's side. I really regret asking you to accompany me to Korea. You shouldn't have experienced such trouble. Charlotte's thoughts were interrupted by her. He smiled. It's nothing. Compared to the trouble we've experienced in the past, this time is nothing. You don't have to accompany me to the groundbreaking ceremony tomorrow. Once I'm done, we'll go back. Okay. Charlotte was eager for that to be the case. At that moment, Enchantment ended the call. After talking to a police officer for a while, he said loudly, Everyone, I'm deeply sorry for the trouble I've caused you tonight. Please forgive me. With that, he bowed deeply. And Jinjian had gotten to where he was today not because of luck, but because of his skill and ability. With his apology, the resentment in the hearts of many of the guests dissipated. Everyone can go back. I'll call you one by one to express my apologies. And Jinjian finally let them go. Charlotte and Shintu Tianyin left. And Xiuxian didn't go up to stop Shintu Tianyin. He kept staring at Charlotte's back, his eyes filled with malice. Chapter 324. After leaving the inn residence, Charlotte and Shintu Tianyin checked into the Jiangnan Lu Yixin Hotel. Charlotte took the key card and opened the door to the room. There was a female attendant in the room, but she wasn't doing anything. She was sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed, admiring the bustling street view outside the window. She only retracted her gaze when Charlotte entered the room. Seeing her face clearly, Charlotte's lips curled into a bitter smile. You should know that it's not appropriate for you to appear here. It's very likely that Xiuxian sent someone to follow me. The woman sitting on the sofa was Long Bing. He didn't know if she knew that Charlotte would book this room, or if she entered the room before Charlotte got the key card. Her appearance was inconceivable, but that was her style. Long Bing said indifferently, "If I couldn't even deal with Xiuxian, I wouldn't be here." Charlotte sat on the bed. "Where's the sword?" "It's already been sent back to the country through a secure channel," Long Bing said. Charlotte let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. That sword is the most important. It's not in Korea, so this is the best outcome. No matter what Jinjian and Xiuxian do, they won't be able to trace it back to me." Long Bing said, "You did a great job this time, but what? Your men aren't clean." Long Bing frowned slightly. "Our target was only the sword of Attila, but he also stole a few valuable antiques from Jinjian. You were there at the time, so why didn't you stop him? Are you here to hold me accountable?" Long Bing didn't say anything. She just looked at Charlotte quietly. Charlotte said, "I was there, and Qin Xiang did take a few things, but I don't think it's a big deal. He took such a big risk, and 101 innings won't give him any rewards. If the mission fails, you won't recognize his identity, and he might even lose his life in Korea. Can't he do something good for himself?" Long Bing sighed. "Don't misunderstand. I'm not here to hold you accountable. I will conceal this matter and not report it. However, you have to warn your people that they can't sell the things they stole for 5 years, or else it will cause trouble. If he becomes the target of Jinjian's investigation because he sold those antiques, his ending will be terrible." Charlotte understood what she meant. If that happened, Qin Xiang's ending would definitely be terrible. Not only would he have to face Jinjian's investigation and assassination, but he would also have to face 101 innings. As for how the 101 innings would be handled, it was hard to guess. "I will warn him," Charlotte said. "Where is he now?" Long Bing said, "He left after giving me the sword of Attila. I guess he must have a way to leave South Korea. I also eavesdropped on the police's conversation and found out that Jinjian also lost a few antiques, so I specially came to tell you about this matter. I don't want him to become a hidden danger, and I won't allow him to become a hidden danger. Do you understand what I mean?" Charlotte nodded with a bitter smile. At that time, he felt that Qin Xiang should get some benefits, so he didn't stop her. He didn't expect that this matter would bring about such a big hidden danger. However, he was confident that he could persuade Qin Xiang not to sell those antiques. "Tomorrow's flight is at 1 p.m. Whether Shintu Tianyin leaves or not, you have to leave. Someone will meet you at Incheon Airport," Long Bing said. Charlotte said, "Shintu Tianyin said that she will leave after the groundbreaking ceremony. I think it's fine. If she doesn't leave, I will go directly to Incheon Airport. Be careful." Long Bing left after saying this. After Long Bing left, Charlotte quietly thought about the world in his room. The process of stealing the sword of Attila replayed in his mind, especially the scene of holding the sword of Attila in his hand. The relic city of the White Xiongnu tribe was built during the heyday of the Xiongnu tribe. The compass of the Ming dynasty pointed to that relic. The two are separated by thousands of years of history, so how could they be related? Also, the weight of the sword of Attila is obviously not right. It's definitely not a normal ancient sword. It's a pity that I didn't have time to take a closer look at it. This time, before I hand it over to Tia of the Great Moon Empire, I must take a closer look. Charlotte thought quietly. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Charlotte's thoughts were interrupted, and his gaze shifted to the door. His left eye twitched slightly, and the person standing outside the door entered his vision. Standing outside the door was Fu Mingmei. She looked a little impatient. She knocked on the door twice. Charlotte got up and walked over, saying, "Who is it?" "It's me." It was Fu Mingmei's voice. Charlotte opened the door. "What's the matter?" "Sister Tianyin would like to invite you for a cup of coffee. She wants to talk to you," Fu Mingmei said. Charlotte looked at the wristwatch on his hand. It was already past 10 p.m., but he did not reject it. "All right, where is it?" "It's at the hotel's cafe," Fu Mingmei said. "Come with me." Charlotte left the room and followed Fu Mingmei to the hotel's cafe. In the elevator, Fu Mingmei asked casually, "I heard that you had a duel with Xiaoxian at the Yin family and even won. Is that true?" "I was just playing with him." "Hee hee." Fu Mingmei laughed. "How can you just play around? He's your rival in love. If you win the duel, Sister Tianyin will give you bonus points." Bonus points again. Charlotte didn't want to hear this word, but he didn't show it on his face. Entering the cafe, Charlotte saw a coffee table next to the floor-to-ceiling window at a glance. She leaned back on the sofa and quietly looked at the street outside the window. Gangnam District was the most prosperous business district in Seoul. It was a world of luxury. Charlotte sat opposite Shintu Tianyin. The waiter came over and ordered a cup of black coffee. "I can't sleep. I want to talk to you." Shintu Tianyin broke the silence between the two. She looked at Charlotte with a special gaze. Charlotte smiled. "I can't sleep either. What are we talking about? Do we need to find a topic to talk to each other?" Shintu Tianyin's tone was a little reproachful. Charlotte said awkwardly, "Actually, I have a lot to talk to you about, but what?" "Nothing." Charlotte didn't know what to say. Shintu Tianyin sighed, and her gaze shifted outside the window. Her thoughts were drifting up and down the bizarre and dazzling street scene, and her heart seemed to be drifting up and down. "I really miss the time when we were together. There was nothing we didn't talk about. In order to protect me, you were even willing to give up your life. In order to cooperate with me, you weren't even afraid that your ex-girlfriend, Liang Xiao, would misunderstand our relationship." There was a trace of sadness in her voice. "But now there seems to be an additional barrier between us. I don't understand what's going on. Can you tell me why?" Charlotte felt the same way. He was silent for a moment before saying, "People will change with the environment. Sometimes we can't do anything about it." Shintu Tianyin's eyes returned to Charlotte. "So, are you the one who has changed, or am I the one who has changed? Are you the one who has changed, or am I the one who has changed?" It was a simple question, but Charlotte couldn't answer it. Shintu Tianyin was an extremely arrogant and outstanding woman. She was also very strong-willed, but even so, she had once opened her heart to Charlotte. At that time, as long as Charlotte put in a little more effort, he could have had everything, but he chose Liang Xiao. Later, Liang Xiao betrayed him, and he was hurt, so he was no longer willing to give his feelings easily. In addition, his career was in a critical period of development, so he didn't think about personal feelings at all. Therefore, he missed the best time to conquer Shintu Tianyin. On the other side, Shintu Tianyin had also changed because of the betrayal of her family. She would no longer trust anyone easily, and her open heart was slowly closing. She knew very well in her heart that she liked Charlotte, but if Charlotte wanted to get her, he had to become the best man and conquer her again. The standard answer to this question was actually already there. Both of them had changed because of what had happened and the environment around them. Forget it. Let's talk about business. Shintu Tianyin changed the topic. I heard that you built a military factory in the capital. That's amazing. Not everyone can do such a business, but you did it. Charlotte said with a smile. I can make money and contribute a little to the country's defense construction. This kind of business is really good. Our country should open up this sector and let more private capital enter. You have entered and you will become a model. I admire you very much. Let's not talk about my small business. It's not worthy of your attention. Charlotte said, let's talk about you. I have wanted to talk to you for a long time. Shintu Tianyin frowned slightly. Do you want to talk to me about Gu Qian? Her intuition was so sensitive that Charlotte couldn't help but smile bitterly. Tianyin, I know it's difficult for you to accept my opinion, but I still have to remind you. Gu Qian is not a simple woman. I have fought with her for so long. My impression of her is that she is a vicious snake. You used her power to annex the former assets of the Gu family. Will she be willing? I gave her a lot of commission. The relationship between us is just a business cooperation. What's the use of her being unwilling? Tianyin, those assets are actually state-owned assets that Gu Dingshan embezzled. You, Shintu Tianyin, interrupted Charlotte's words. I bought them through legitimate channels. There will be no problem. As for you, this is clearly an opportunity for you to expand your company quickly. Why are you so indifferent? You are a man. You should have a man's ambition. Charlotte secretly sighed in his heart. Her character is always so strong. She doesn't listen to other people's advice. He couldn't say what he wanted to say. He tried to persuade her again, but she didn't listen. What's the use of persuading her? Just when the atmosphere between the two of them became awkward, a group of people suddenly came into the coffee shop. There were uniformed police officers and people in plain clothes. The person who led this group of people into the coffee shop was none other than Enchantment. Seeing Enchantment appear here with a large group of people, Charlotte immediately became vigilant. Why is he here? Shintu Tianyin frowned. At this time, Enchantment noticed Shintu Tianyin and Charlotte sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window. He strode over. The large group of people he brought, the police and bodyguards, intentionally or unintentionally dispersed, and then surrounded Shintu Tianyin and Charlotte. Those who come are not good, and those who are kind don't come. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.